Chapter 1088. Everyone was so shocked by his reaction that they could not react for a moment. Fellow Yi. Chi Tiandao hurriedly chased after him. Court dismissed. Yuni looked at everyone coldly and left with a flick of his sleeve. As the few of them left, the officials of the imperial court looked at each other and could not help but look at each other. An official said weakly, "Sirs, we've discussed for a long time, but it seems like we haven't come up with an effective plan to retreat. What can we do? Why don't we invite that Mr. Yi back?" A rank 5 official could not help but say, "At the moment of life and death, our dynasty is surrounded in many places. Now, we can only try everything we can." What a joke. At this moment, Prime Minister Gu Ifu sneered and said, "Looks like the Grand Preceptor is really old. He actually placed the hopes of our dynasty on an outsider." At this point, he said nonchalantly, "I don't believe that our dynasty is really at a dead end. Moreover, there's still no news of Yinang Pass's fall. We still have hope. The Prime Minister is right. Yinang Pass is guarded by General Han. In addition, it's easy to defend and difficult to attack. How can the rebels break through? That's right. Before that brat left, he actually told us not to beg him. What a joke. We are high-ranking officials of the Imperial Court. Why would we beg a commoner? Even if I die, I won't beg a brat." The rest of the ministers chimed in incessantly. Outside the palace, Chi Tiandao caught up to Yi Chun quickly and sighed softly. "They're all civil officials. Apart from being able to talk, they're useless. Why do you care about them?" Yi Chun suddenly stopped and turned to look at him. "You're wrong. I'm not arguing with them. I shouldn't have meddled in other people's business." With that, he left resolutely. Seeing that he had made up his mind, Chi Tiandao could only smile bitterly. His figure then disappeared into the hazy night. That night, several military orders were issued from the capital. The resulting chain reaction was that countless armies headed south, speeding towards Wild Goose Pass. Obviously, they wanted to reinforce this final barrier. Secondly, Imperial advisor Chi Tiandao personally led 200,000 soldiers to the border to resist the attack of 500,000 soldiers from the enemy Qing Kingdom. Longjing City began to be heavily guarded. People were only allowed to leave, but not to enter. The Royal Guards, and the City Defense Army all left the city, setting up 3 lines of defense between Yinang Pass and Longjing City. At the same time, the Ministry of War began to mobilize the common people overnight to recruit soldiers and horses. The person in charge was the current Prime Minister, Gu Ifu. In less than 2 hours, he had successfully gathered an army of 350,000 soldiers. One of the ministers complimented, "As expected of the Prime Minister, such efficiency can be said to be godly." Gu Ifu stroked his beard and laughed. "This time, I have raised 300,000 soldiers. I have already submitted a petition to Empress Dowager to allow my son Gu Yu to lead them south. With young Master Gu leading the team personally, we will definitely be victorious. We will defeat the enemy and help our sect escape." The assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue was full of flattery. "We will congratulate the Prime Minister in advance. Once the rebels retreat, the Prime Minister's name will definitely shake the major sections. Your prestige might even surpass the Imperial advisor." Yes, the others nodded in agreement. Gu Ifu pretended to be humble. "It's all for the great sect." In the Empress Dowager's bedroom, Yun Yi looked at herself in the mirror in a daze. Her body was a little stiff. "Mr. Yi is gone?" An old eunuch bowed and said, "Empress Dowager, the people I sent to investigate reported that the mansion was already empty. It seems that Mr. Yi really left." Yun Yi's eyes dimmed. She suddenly felt a sense of bitterness in her heart. She then took a deep breath and said, "Forget it. I was too selfish. After all, Mr. Yi is not a member of our sect. It's just that I don't know when I will see Mr. Yi again, or maybe we will never see each other again in this life." At such a time, she did not dare to think about it, and she could not think about it. Less than 1,000 miles away from Longjing, in an extremely hidden kernel, the terrain was relatively low, and it was a natural cave that extended nearly 100 feet deep into the ground. If an ordinary person fell in, they would definitely be smashed into pieces. At that moment, 2 figures, one big and one small, appeared near the cave. They did not move in the face of the huge suction coming from the cave. "It's here." Yi-chun carried his daughter and looked at the cave before him quietly. Chi Tiandao once said that the great dynasty's wormhole is here. It seems like he didn't lie to me. Now that I have the great dynasty's teleportation token, I can teleport to the other 5 territories. His eyes flickered. "However, I still don't know where Yuhan and my parents are. Where should I go? Eastern Wilderness? Southern Region? Western Desert? Or Middle State and Tianfeng Sea area?" The king Mu fort in the Tianfeng Sea area can be considered to be related to me. Perhaps I can use their power to find Yuhan and the rest, Yi-chun thought to himself. The little girl was in his embrace. She looked down from her neck and said in fear of heights, "Daddy, are we jumping down from here? If you're afraid, close your eyes. Open them when Daddy calls for you." Yi-chun kissed her lovingly. His wife was not here, his parents were not here, and his brothers and friends were not here either. Fortunately, his daughter was with him. At that moment, his ears trembled a few times, and he suddenly looked into the distance. Over there were several auras rushing towards them. 4 of them had actually reached the martial arts grandmaster level. Yi-chun's eyes flickered a few times. Subsequently, he gestured to his daughter to keep quiet and gradually hid in the void. Whoosh, whoosh, a moment later 4 figures landed near the cave. They were 4 men, and the leader was a Taoist with a plump figure. The fat Taoist lowered his head and sized up the cave for a few seconds before saying, "Fellow Wu, are you sure that the wormhole below is where the royal family of the major sects are hiding?" A freckled old man behind him said, "Fellow Liu, this secret was discovered by my master on behalf of the king. It's absolutely true. How can it be wrong? Since it was discovered by the king, then it can't be wrong." The fat Taoist nodded. "Now that the 8 kings are suppressing Yindang Pass, in order to prevent the royal family from escaping to other territories, we must destroy this wormhole." What? The moment that was said, the other 3 were shocked. Someone said, "Fellow Wu, it's extremely difficult to build such an impulsive formation. Once it's destroyed, it'll completely cut off the connection between our northern region and the other regions. I can't care so much." The fat Taoist's words flickered. "I heard that a few days ago, a demon suddenly appeared in the southern region. This demon wreaked havoc in the entire southern region and wiped out many great sects overnight." "Fellow Taoist Wu, is the demon you speak of a corpse monarch? It's said that this fellow has killed many powerhouses and even forced a martial saint to take action. Even so, it's difficult to stop him." Someone sucked in a breath of cold air. End of this chapter. Chapter 1089. "That's right, it's him." The fat priest nodded. "Therefore, in order to prevent this person from entering our northern territory, we have to destroy this wormhole no matter what." On the other hand, Yi-chun, who was hiding next to them with the invisibility tactic, was moved when he heard that. Devil? Corpse Emperor? Could it be that he had won? At that moment, a black ball of light suddenly appeared in the fat priest's hand. It was shrouded in a dense aura of death that did not dissipate. However, the moment they saw it, the expressions of the other 3 changed drastically, and their eyes were filled with fear. Could this be the upside-down ball of the northern barbarians? Someone sucked in a breath of cold air. "That's right." The fat priest smiled faintly. "It's the upside-down autumn of the northern barbarians. As long as you throw this into the wormhole, you can change the rules of space and make it collapse automatically." With that, he held the upside-down ball in one hand and looked down at the cave in front of him. He grinned sinisterly and said, "Great sects and royal families, once your path of retreat is cut off, you'll be completely trapped by the 8 kings." Right at that moment, he suddenly felt his hand lighten. The upside-down ball in his hand suddenly disappeared. At the next moment, Yi-chun's figure appeared slowly. He looked at the upside-down ball in his hand and shook his head. "Fortunately, I came in time. Otherwise, you guys would have destroyed the wormhole here." As he appeared, the expressions of the 4 of them changed slightly. They immediately stared at him, as if they were facing a great enemy. When the fat priest came back to his senses, his expression was extremely terrible. "Brat, how dare you take my thing? Let me ask you, Did the devil from the southern region that you mentioned earlier claim to have one? Yi Chen exerted strength in his arm and shattered the upside-down ball completely. How dare you destroy my upside-down ball? The fat priest was shocked and furious. He attacked Yi Chen with killing intent from behind. I'll make you beg for death. Yi Chen merely glanced at him. Just a glance. The fat priest immediately felt that he could no longer move. At the same time, an extremely terrifying pressure crushed over like a tide. Plop! He immediately knelt on the ground, feeling extremely shocked. He was a martial ancestor. He could not even withstand a single glance. When the other three saw this, they were stunned at first. Then, they wanted to fly away without saying a word. Stay here. Yi Chen waved his sleeve and pressed the three of them onto the ground directly. Subsequently, he walked toward the fat priest step by step. Senior, I'm a man of King Chu, the fat Taoist hastily said. However, Yi Chen could not be bothered to talk to him. He pressed his hand on his head and performed the soul-searching tactic forcefully. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, 4 fireballs shot out from Yi Chen's fingertip. 3 Wuzongs were burned to ashes on the spot. The new demon from the southern region has indeed won. Yi Chen was between laughter and tears. Through using the soul-searching spell on the 4 of them, Yi Fuqian found out that Ing had actually come to the ancient barren world a day earlier than him. However, Ing had landed in the southern region. This guy seemed to be injured. As soon as he appeared, he was subdued into a corpse puppet by a powerful being. However, the other party underestimated Ying's capabilities. 2 days later, he was sucked dry by Ying. And now, he had become the public enemy of the southern region. He frowned. It's a pity that the 4 of them don't know the whereabouts of the patriarch, Wu Shuang, and the others. Yi Chen walked to the last old man as he thought to this point. He performed the soul-searching tactic while ignoring the old man's begging. After digesting the old man's memories, there was finally a slight change on his calm face. Yun Yi has actually seen the ghost ship. From the last person's memory, he learned that the old man was from the Northern Barbarians. The reason why the Northern Barbarians were involved in the civil war of the great dynasties was all because of Yun Yi. It was because there had been traces of the ghost ship in the northern region. Only a few people knew about this. The great figure of the Northern Barbarians was one of them, and the other one was Yun Yi. The ghost ship. At that moment, Yi Chen became slightly excited. Didn't the last time the ghost ship appeared was when that lunatic took Yuhan and the rest away? In other words, if I know about the ghost ship, wouldn't I have a chance to know the whereabouts of Yuhan and my parents? Thinking to this point, he raised his head and looked in the direction of Longjing. Looks like the breakthrough point is Yun, the great dynasties, Longjing City. The sky gradually brightened. However, at this moment, the outside of Longjing City was densely covered with a strong killing intent, but there was even more endless despair. Countless soldiers guarding the city stood on the city gate tower and looked outside the city with fear in their eyes. Among them, there was no lack of the Empress Dowager of the great dynasties, Yun Yi, and all the ministers. An army, a densely packed army. At this moment, looking out of Longjing, there were figures everywhere. The generals were like clouds, and the carriages were like dragons. The allied army of the 8 kings used less than 4 hours to break through Yindang Pass, and all the soldiers guarding the pass died in battle. The loss of Yindang Pass caused the last barrier of Longjing to be completely lost. The rebel army marched straight in, and the soldiers were at the gates. On the border, the imperial advisor led an army of 200,000 and was in a stalemate with the enemy Qin kingdom. He was on his way to provide reinforcements. My son, you died so miserably. On the city gate tower, Prime Minister Gu Yifu almost cried his eyes blind. It was as if he had aged dozens of years in an instant. Normally, perhaps there would be ministers who would go over to support him and comfort him. However, at this moment, everyone only felt anger toward him. The 300,000 new soldiers he had gathered were led by his eldest son, Gu Yu. However, they had been scattered by the 50,000 rebel soldiers. In the end, the 300,000 soldiers had been trapped and killed. The so-called trapped and killed was to bury them alive. Because of his blind confidence, he had buried the hopes of the great dynasties and countless families. An official roared angrily, "Stop crying. If you want to cry, wait until you reunite with your useless son in the underworld." He looked at all of this with a mocking expression. From a moment the news of the defeat came to the moment the rebel army surrounded Longjing, she had not said a single word. She knew that the great dynasties were finished. Even if the imperial advisor could arrive in time, he would be powerless to turn the situation around, much less the imperial advisor. She quietly sized up everyone around her. There were those who were afraid, those who were determined, and those who were crying. However, her heart was incomparably calm. She subconsciously glanced to the south, and the scenes of Yi Chun escorting her to the north involuntarily appeared in her mind. If Mr. Yi had not left, with his bravery, perhaps the great dynasties would still have a glimmer of hope. With that thought, she rejected it. No, Mr. Yi left well. He's not a member of the great dynasties, so he shouldn't stay behind to accompany us in death. She subconsciously gripped her sleeve. No one knew that there was a pair of scissors in her sleeve. That was what she had prepared for herself. The day the city was breached would be the day she committed suicide. Right at this moment, a steed suddenly galloped out from the army outside the city. The other party stopped outside the range of the city wall. Above it, a burly man in armor sneered. "Empress Dowager, my lord only has one thing to say on behalf of the king. As long as you are willing to order the city to surrender and hand over the person surnamed Yi, more killing can be prevented. Otherwise, when we attack the city, it will be the time to massacre the city." End of this chapter. Chapter 1090. Longjing City. The generals stood tall, and the flags fluttered in the wind. Otherwise, when we attack the city, it will be time to massacre the city. As the voice of the commanding officer fell, the people on the wall were dead silent at first, but then they burst into an uproar. Most of them were cries of fear. Massacre the city. The rebel army actually wanted to massacre the city. One had to know that this was the capital of a major dynasty. There were millions of people in the city. Once the city was massacred, millions of people would die. Most importantly, the Empress Dowager, Yin Yi, and many important officials of the imperial court were present. "Traitors, you traitors will die a horrible death. Empress Dowager, don't open the city. As officials, we have long handed over our lives to the country. Yes, we would rather die than surrender." Many officials and soldiers guarding the city roared at the top of their lungs, their eyes filled with determination. "Why don't we open the city? That's right. That's a massacre. Once we anger them, all of us will die. Empress Dowager, we don't want to die." Most of them begged for mercy and fear. Some even knelt before Yuni. Some even rushed down the city wall, as if they wanted to surrender. Throughout the entire process, Empress Dowager Yun Yi supported the little emperor beside her and watched this scene expressionlessly. When she noticed the wailing ministers, there was only sorrow and mockery in her eyes. It was because most of these people were the ones who opposed Yi Qin's involvement in the matter of the dynasty. Thinking to this point, she raised her head slightly and looked at the army that covered the sky and earth. Her gaze landed on the messenger, and then she opened her red lips slightly. "I can die, but the dignity of the royal family will never fall." As soon as he said that, the messenger below the city immediately sneered. "Do you want to drag the entire city down with you?" The threat in his words was not concealed at all, but it was mixed with dense, killing intent. At the same time, the army outside the city shouted in unison. The commotion was like thunder. It caused everyone's expression to change. "Wait!" Gu Ifu suddenly roared loudly, and then said to the acting king, "Acting king, princes, this lowly official is willing to surrender. This lowly official is willing to surrender." Everyone looked at him in disbelief when they heard this. One had to know. He, Gu Ifu, was the prime minister of the dynasty. Previously, he had given everyone the impression that he was incomparably loyal, and many officials viewed him as a role model. However, in this time of national crisis, he actually wanted to defect to the enemy? Yun Yi's delicate body trembled slightly. A minister scolded, Gu Ifu, you're shameless. Don't forget that you're the prime minister. So what? Gu Ifu smiled coldly. This old man has done enough for the country. Now, I just want to spend my remaining years in peace. At this point, he looked extremely pained. Moreover, my son, Guyu, has already sacrificed his life for the country. He has already done enough for the country. Shameless. Old man, you are really shameless and hypocritical. Many people pointed at him and cursed. Gu Ifu looked at Yun Yi, and the little emperor smiled disdainfully and then jumped down from the city wall. Although he was a civil official, he had cultivated before. Even though he had not reached the Grandmaster realm, this small city wall was not a problem for him. Ha ha ha! At this time, there was a sudden burst of laughter from the army outside the city. If Prime Minister Gu is willing to defect, I will welcome you. Under everyone's gaze, the army slowly parted to form a path. Then, several people walked in the air carrying a sedan chair. As the sedan chair landed, a middle-aged man wearing a dragon robe slowly walked out from it. It's the acting king, this traitor, someone exclaimed. Everyone looked at the middle-aged man again. Their eyes were filled with shock and hatred. It was this person who contacted the other 7 vassals and triggered this civil war in the dynasty. Gu Ifu walked over respectfully and said with a slight flattery, "Thank you, Your Highness." "No, thank you, Your Majesty. This old official will repay you with my life." After saying that, he stood behind the acting king. The acting king looked at the city wall again, his eyes focused on Yun Yi. "Empress Dowager, now that things have come to this, why not surrender? Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for the countless people in this city, right?" However, Yun Yi just glanced at him, refusing a toast only to drink a forfeit. The acting king's face turned cold and said, "I will give you another chance. As long as you are willing to surrender to me in advance, not only will I not kill you, but I will also reward you afterward." As his voice fell, there were people directly jumped down from the city wall. "Your Highness, I am willing to surrender." In just a few breaths, there were more than a dozen civil officials who jumped down from the city wall in front of everyone, defecting at the last minute. This scene infuriated everyone present, but there was more helplessness. Yun Yi raised her head, her slender hand slowly grasping the little emperor beside her, and then she smiled. "Jing, are you afraid of death?" "Mother, I don't want to die." The little emperor was already in a daze, shivering, his eyes full of fear. "I know you don't want to die," Yun Yi said softly, "but you're the emperor. You are the ruler of a country. You are the only descendant of the previous emperor. You are the face of the royal family. As the saying goes, the emperor guards the gate of the country, and the emperor dies for the country. You have the obligation to live and die with this city." Her voice was neither loud nor soft, but every single word was heard by everyone around her. "Empress Dowager, many loyal and upright people were moved, and those who were greedy for life and afraid of death before looked extremely ashamed." The little emperor still shook his head. "No, I don't want to die." Yun Yi smiled faintly and gently picked up the little emperor. She then surveyed her surroundings, and within her clear and cold gaze, there was a sliver of determination. "People of the big sex, it is because of my incompetence that the world is in such a disaster today." The next moment, she carried the little emperor and directly jumped onto the city wall, then jumped down heavily, face down. Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked, obviously not expecting her to make such a choice. Even the army outside the city was dumbfounded. "Empress Dowager, no." The commander of the Imperial Guards, Ma Yuanshuan, took a step forward, his figure swept, and directly grabbed Yun Yi's skirt in midair. Only then did the 2 people who were falling stop. "Empress Dowager." Ma Yuanshuan grabbed the person with one hand and the city wall with the other and snorted. "We still have hope. Why do you have to do this? Save them, quick, save them." He roared at the top of his lungs. Only then did many people on the city wall come to their senses. One after another, experts moved, pulling the 3 people up. "Empress Dowager." A general knelt down heavily. "Today, I am willing to live and die with this city. I hope you will not belittle yourself. End of this chapter. Chapter 1091. Thump, thump, thump. Following a series of loud noises, more than 1,000 soldiers knelt down in unison. We are willing to live and die with this city. Seeing this, a civil official also knelt down and laughed. I am willing to live and die with this city. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, everyone on the city wall knelt down. We are willing to live and die with this city. We are willing to live and die with this city. Millions of people in the city shouted in unison. The atmosphere in the entire world was pushed to its peak, and countless commoners revealed resolute expressions. If they were previously afraid of death, after witnessing Yun Yi's actions, the fear in their hearts no longer existed. Instead, it was replaced by bravery and determination. This movement could be said to be earth-shattering, causing the faces of the soldiers outside the city to change. They were all shocked by this imposing manner, forcibly inciting the hearts of the people. Outside the city, the acting king looked on mockingly. He then looked at Yun Yi and sneered. This woman is not simple. Unfortunately, she is only a woman. Today, not even the gods can save you all. He raised his hand slightly, and an indifferent voice came from his mouth. Attack the city. Leave no one alive. As soon as these words came out, someone roared. The acting king has ordered, attack the city. Leave no one alive. Leave no one alive. Ho, ho, ho. The originally silent army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers moved in unison. They all took a step forward and pushed the siege weapons to the front. There were wooden gates, siege ladders, kerosene, catapults, and so on. The number of weapons made one's scalp go numb. Empress Dowager, please step aside. The commander of the Imperial Guards, Yun Xuan, roared and then turned to the soldiers. Is your blood still warm? Are you all afraid of death? Fight to the death. Fight to the death. On the city wall, the 30,000 soldiers roared in unison. They then took a step forward and unsheathed their long swords. There were no less than 300,000 rebels. Adding up all of them, there were only 30,000 of them. Even if the disparity in strength was too great, so what? At most, they would just die. Fellow citizens, those who are not afraid of death can come forward. Today, we will let the rebels know that even if they die, they will pay the price. The Minister of Justice, Li Shan laughed tragically. Count me in. A dark-skinned man carrying a child in the city responded and silently handed the child to his wife beside him. If I die, you can remarry and raise our son well. With that, he resolutely stepped onto the tower, leaving behind the crying child and his wife, who was secretly wiping away her tears. A disheveled young man knelt heavily in front of an old man. Grandpa, the country is in danger. Please forgive me for not being able to take care of you in your old age. Child, the old man stretched out his old hand and caressed her face. He said in a trembling voice, You go ahead of me. I'll come to find you after I've collected your remains. The young man nodded and ascended the tower resolutely. An imperial guard handed him a bow and asked, Do you know how to use it? Yes. The young man took it and drew the bow into the shape of a full moon. My family is poor, so I often go hunting in the mountains. Okay, stand behind me later. The imperial guard grinned. Go after I die. If I don't die, help me collect my bones and bring them back to my family. By the way, they call him Big Blackie. What about you? My name is Ding Pong. The young man's eyes suddenly turned red. And me. If a man dies, then so be it. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In less than 30 minutes, tens of thousands of young men stood up in the city. These people spontaneously stood behind the city gate. Due to the lack of weapons and equipment, most of them didn't have any armor or weapons to protect themselves. Some of them were holding wooden sticks, some were holding iron rakes for digging dung, and some were holding kitchen knives. Yenny looked at this scene with tears in her eyes. She was entrusted with a heavy responsibility by the late emperor. But from the beginning to the end, she did not have much of a sense of acceptance towards this responsibility. To be precise, she resisted it. But at this moment, she only felt that even if she died immediately, she would have no regrets. Kill! The commanders of the rebel army shouted in unison. Rumble, the tens of thousands of soldiers in the lead, suddenly stepped forward, carrying a huge battering ram as they charged straight at the city gate. Siege ladders were pushed forward, catapults were launched, and shields covered the sky as they smashed directly at the city wall. At this moment, the atmosphere between heaven and earth suddenly changed. As if a mountain torrent had broken out, the fierce sound of killing covered everything. "Release the arrows!" Ma Yuan shouted from atop the city wall. Among the nearly 50,000 soldiers, 10,000 archers stepped forward in unison. Ignoring the flying boulders, they knocked their arrows and drew their bowstrings. Thump! Thump! Someone screamed and someone fell. But every time someone fell, someone else would step forward to replace him. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh! An overwhelming rain of arrows rained down from the top of the city walls, landing on the attacking army like dense raindrops. So the rebel army fell, and some screamed. But compared to the total number of casualties, it was no different from a stone falling into the sea, unable to cause a single ripple. The acting king sat in his carriage, expressionless as he watched the scene unfold before him, as if the withering of lives did not affect him at all. Acting king, why don't we divide the troops into 4 groups and attack from all 4 gates at the same time? A strategist suggested. They have few troops and even fewer equipment, so they will not be able to defend all 4 gates at the same time. As long as any one of the gates is breached, it will be the end of them. What's the hurry? The acting king peeled an orange and ate it. I have the advantage in numbers. If we want to fight, we must completely crush all their hopes. Only then will the other 7 fellows know how powerful I am. The other 7 kings are on their way here now. I am worried that they will pick up a ready-made. The strategist said hesitantly. Noisy. The acting king looked at him coldly. Just one look. The strategist hurriedly apologized and did not say a word. Rumble. As the earth-shattering sounds grew louder and louder, the siege battle entered a white-hot state, with people dying one after another. Thousands of soldiers defending the city died in an instant. Corpses kept falling, and people kept coming to replace them without fear of death. Yun clenched her fists tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. Your Majesty, take a good look. These people died for you, for the royal family of our major sex. The little emperor covered his eyes with his hands and screamed in fear. At this moment, the attacking army was less than 10 feet away from the north gate. As long as they got close, the tall north gate would be smashed open in no time. Ma Yuan roared. Archers, we must not let them get close to the city gate. Even if we all die, we must hold on. The imperial tutor is on his way back. End of this chapter. Chapter 1092. On the city wall, Ding Peng stood at the back with his bow and arrows, trembling as he looked at the corpses that fell one after another in front of him. It was too tragic. Before this, he had never witnessed a real war with his own eyes. His trip to serve his country was purely due to his hot-bloodedness. However, within the time it took for an incense stick to burn, he witnessed the tragedy of the battle with his own eyes. Someone was dying every minute and every second. The boulders rumbled, and his ears were almost deafened. It was as if the entire city was shaking. The kerosene spread to the city wall and ignited a raging fire. Some people were burned alive, and the air was filled with the smell of burning and stench. Is this a real war? Ding Peng's teeth trembled as he noticed that the dark-skinned man beside him was extremely calm, constantly wiping the crossbow in his hand. For this person, Ding Peng remembered. It was Chun Dong's blacksmith, Chun Taizhu. He was the man who handed the child in his hand to his wife and was the first to climb the city wall. Uncle Taizhu, Ding Peng said with a trembling voice. You're not afraid? Afraid? The dark-skinned man immediately fell silent, then laughed self-deprecatingly. There's no one who isn't afraid, but in this world, fear can't solve things. Ding Peng seemed to understand. Seeing that he was really afraid, the dark-skinned man smiled and said, Little Peng, you're still a virgin, right? Ding Peng was stunned, then his face turned red. Obviously, he did not expect that the other party would still be in the mood to care about this at this time. I promise you, Taiju, don't die. The dark-skinned man patted his shoulder. Live well. Later let your grandfather find a wife for you. The taste of women is very wonderful. That big white legs, that big high. Tisk. Gulp. Ding Peng could not help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. At this time, the city guard shouted, Chen Taiju, here. The dark-skinned man almost subconsciously got up, then picked up the bough on the ground and rushed into the front line of defense. Before leaving, he turned back and said to Ding Peng, You must survive. Immediately after, Ding Peng discovered that the arrows shot by the unscrupulous Uncle Taiju had accurately hit people. Good. The other archers cheered in unison. Chun Taiju subconsciously looked back at the crowd in the city behind him, trying to see if his wife and children were still there. Boom! A huge rock flew from below the city and directly smashed into his body. In an instant, more than a dozen corpses were heavily smashed into the ground. Uncle Taiju! Ding Peng's eyes almost split open. The city guard shouted at the top of his lungs, Big Black, Ding Peng. Ding Peng fell heavily to the ground, his body trembling more and more. The scene of the dark-skinned man's tragic death still echoed in his mind. At this moment, he felt someone pat his shoulder. He looked up and saw that the person in front of him was Big Blackie, who had spoken to him earlier. Let's go. Big Blackie was still smiling. Ding Peng suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, the veins on his neck throbbing violently. He then picked up the bough on the ground and rushed to the front line of defense with a loud shout. Kill, kill, kill. Kill all of you. He screamed like a madman, and the arrows in his hand shot out one after another. His archery skills were even better than Chun Tieju's, even surpassing the professional archers in the army. Every arrow he fired was sure to kill a person. Seeing this scene, the acting king outside the city frowned and then said, Bring me my bow. Not long after, he held a purple bow, then knocked an arrow and pointed it at Ding Peng on the city wall. Whoosh! Ding Peng heard the sound of air being pierced and saw a purple bow, an arrow coming at him at lightning speed. Dodge! Big Blackie immediately pounced on him. Puff! Big Blackie's body fell heavily below the city wall. No! Ding Peng fell to the ground and roared. Rest in peace. Yun Yi, who saw this scene, was frighteningly pale. If I don't die, I will treat your family well. She then looked at the little emperor hiding behind more than a dozen imperial guards, and her eyes were full of disappointment. Your Majesty, you really disappoint me. Rumble, at this moment, the entire city wall shook violently. The rebel army pushed the battering ram and approached the city gate. The huge battering ram had only been pushed once, but the entire city wall was on the verge of collapsing. On top of the countless siege ladders, there were countless rebel soldiers who were not afraid of death, trying to climb up the tower. Relying on his profound cultivation, Ma Yuanshuan ignored the overwhelming number of arrows and boulders. He stepped into the air and slashed with his saber. Countless enemies died tragically. He also went crazy. He directly landed below the city wall, and with a long saber in hand, he killed the enemy soldiers who were pushing the battering ram. His saber rose and fell, and heads rolled. Kill! Another few defending generals joined forces and landed, trying to use their strength to share the burden of the defending soldiers. You're asking for it. Seeing this, the acting king sneered and said, Order the sects to attack. Whoever disobeys, kill without mercy. Boom! Not long after, more than a dozen ancestral martial artists from the rebel army's camp flew into the air and attacked Ma Yuanshuan and the others with ferocious expressions. Screams rang out incessantly. Generals who jumped down from the city wall were killed one after another, and the battering ram once again slammed heavily against the north gate. Kill! Ma Yuanshuan was like a crazed demon, single-handedly fighting against the combined forces of 3 ancestral martial artists. You bastards deserve to die. The 3 ancestral martial artists were not only unable to do anything to him, but they were also forced to retreat. The acting king once again knocked an arrow and aimed it at Ma Yuanshuan. Whoosh! The arrow directly pierced through Minchuan's chest, and the force of the arrow sent him flying heavily. Die! The three ancestral martial artists joined forces again. Ha ha! Ma Yuanchuan's body was almost broken, but he still laughed loudly. Traitors, you bunch of traitors. Even if I die today, I will wait for you down there. Die! One of the ancestral martial artists chopped off his head. General Ma Yun cried her heart out. Rumble. At the same time, the north gate was breached. Tens of thousands of rebel soldiers charged into the city. In front of them was a force of tens of thousands of civilians. It's over. Yun fell heavily to the ground, her heart dead. She then took a deep breath and struggled to walk to the top of the city wall. Stop! Stop! The acting king waved his hand. The world suddenly quietened down. The acting king looked up at Yun and sneered. Empress Dowager, if you knew this would happen, why did you do it? You win, Yun said with difficulty, her voice hoarse. Let them go, and I will let you do whatever you want of me. Do you think you're qualified to negotiate with me? The acting king sneered. Yun said woodenly, don't forget, the Imperial Jade Seal is in my hands, and so is the Commander's Seal. Also, the Emperor is in my hands. She then slowly stretched out her hand and grabbed the little Emperor in the distance. The little Emperor was caught in her hand. Mother, let go of me. The little Emperor struggled. He looked at the people below with a sad face and said, they are all my people. Even if you win the world, you will still need their support. The acting king was silent. Yun ignored the little Emperor's struggle and said again, as long as you promise me not to massacre the city, I can give you the Imperial Jade Seal and the Commander's Seal. I can even ask His Majesty to abdicate the throne to you. She was extremely disappointed in the little Emperor. Between the dying wish of the late Emperor and the lives of millions of people, she finally chose the lives of millions of people. The acting king's expression changed a few times. He was slightly moved and said, if you obediently come down now, I may consider agreeing to your conditions. Yun Yi's body trembled when she heard this. How could she not know the other party's purpose? It was because he did not want her to die. Because everyone knew that the acting king was lustful. Under such circumstances, how could he let her go? Empress Dowager, you can't. Some of the surviving officials hurriedly knelt down. Empress Dowager, all the people knelt down. Yun closed her eyes, and her eyelashes trembled as if she was struggling in her heart. After a few seconds, she opened her eyes and smiled bitterly. Okay, I promise you. As her voice fell, many people were in pain. The Empress Dowager had sacrificed herself for them. Congratulations, Your Highness. Gu Ifu jumped out and bowed to the acting king. Congratulations, Your Majesty. Not only did you win the world, you also won the beauty. The rest of the people also flattered him. Under everyone's gaze, Yun leaped down from the city tower and walked toward the acting king step by step. The acting king's heart was stirred. It was as if he could see the beauty of spring in the night when the former was less than 10 steps away from him. He could not help but take a few steps forward and directly reach out to Yun. From now on, you are my woman. Just as his hand was about to touch Yun, an extremely indifferent voice suddenly sounded in the air. If you touch a single hair on her, I will kill your entire family and your 9 generations. End of this chapter. Chapter 1093. Longjing City. The flames of war raged, and blood flowed like rivers. Yun staggered as she slowly walked towards the acting king in the distance. With every step she took, her heart would die a little, because she knew what she would face next. Either she would become a plaything, or she would become a puppet of authority. Therefore, when she saw the acting king reaching out his hand impatiently, she could not help but close her eyes as if she had accepted her fate. The moment she closed her eyes, it was a complete compromise. At that moment, she heard a familiar voice. If you touch a single hair on her, I'll kill your entire family and your entire clan. The voice was neither loud nor soft, but reverberated endlessly in the world, entering everyone's ears without missing a single word. At that moment, the acting king's outstretched hand froze. Everyone subconsciously looked in the direction of the voice. It was at that moment that Yun-yi, who had already accepted her fate, trembled slightly. She suddenly opened her eyes and looked at the world. Her beautiful eyes were filled with unconcealable excitement, disbelief, and even trembling. Is it Mr. Yi? At the next moment, a figure appeared from afar at some point in time. As the space distorted, the figure rushed over like lightning. It was a cold young man with fluttering white hair. He was holding a little girl in his right hand, and golden flames flickered in his eyes. His entire body was like a 10,000-year-old ice cube. Along with his appearance, the temperature in this area instantly dropped. It's really Mr. Yi. Looking at that face, even Yun-yi, who had always been determined, felt an indescribable emotion surging in her heart. In her clear eyes, there was a thick layer of mist condensing. She initially thought that Yi-chun had left because of what happened earlier. Even so, she did not blame Yi-chun. As Yi-chun was not related to her, he had no obligation to help her repeatedly. However, what she did not expect was, Yi-chun had come to save her. Your Highness, be careful. Almost at that moment, countless powerhouses stood in front of the acting king to protect him. They looked at Yi-chun vigilantly. It's him. Gu Ifu's expression changed. He then pointed at Yi-chun and said, Your Highness, this is the person with the surname Yi that you're looking for. The acting king's expression changed slightly when he heard that. He then glared at Yi-chun, trying to see through him. Under everyone's gaze, Yi-chun glanced around and eventually landed his gaze on Yun-yi. He then walked over to her step by step. Wherever he passed, many soldiers would be intimidated by his bearing, and they would subconsciously make way for him. A glint of killing intent flashed across the eyes of a martial ancestor realm expert. He stealthily gathered his strength as if he was about to attack. However, he soon discovered that the white-haired young man only looked at him coldly with a hint of mockery. Just one look. That person's heart skipped a beat. He felt as if he had been seen through. His heart was filled with shock, and he unconsciously took a few steps back. Eventually, Yi-chun walked to Yun-yi's side step by step. Under the latter's complicated gaze, he said slowly, With me here today, no one can touch you. Hearing those words, Yun-yi felt her nose turn sour. She nearly started crying because of those words. However, the former suddenly said, But there's a condition. She could not help but chuckle. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Yi-chun turned around slowly and lifted his eyes to look around. When he saw the corpses that were piled up like a mountain, he shook his head secretly and looked at the surrounding rebels. His gaze landed on Gu Ifu and the rest as he grinned and said, Isn't this Prime Minister Gu? Why did you suddenly become the Prime Minister of the rebel army? How could Gu Ifu not hear the disdain in his words? He felt his face turn green and pale as he snorted coldly. His Highness is looking for you. There's a way out for you, but you chose to barge into hell instead. Are you the mad Southern Yi who killed countless experts for my 8 kings? The acting king looked at Yi-chun with a grim expression. Yi-chun shook his head and said while smiling, I'm killing trash like you. As soon as that was said, a cold gleam flashed in the acting king's eyes. Then, as if he thought of something, he suddenly smiled and said, I thought you ran away, but I didn't expect you to come back. At this point, he could not help but glance at Yun-yi. You're here for her, aren't you? The Empress Dowager is actually secretly communicating with someone. Interesting. He seemed to be smiling in disdain. Even though his voice was not loud, it reached many people's ears. Many people subconsciously looked at Yun-yi. You're shameless. Yun-yi's pretty face turned livid. The acting king scoffed and looked at Yi-chun. I've heard that you're extraordinary. However, don't you think it's stupid for you to become enemies with me for a woman? He changed the topic. I'll give you a chance. As long as you're willing to submit to me, I can spare your life. Are you done? Yi-chun interrupted. Brat, you're courting death. A martial ancestor stage general was furious as killing intent surged in his eyes. At the next moment, his figure charged out directly as vast true energy surged. The pressure swept through heaven and earth. A ferocious punch that contained all his strength tore through the sky and charged at Yi Chen's head. However, Yi Chen's expression did not change at all in the face of such an attack. He merely lifted his palm and stretched it out gently. Noisy. Bang! A bloody mist splattered in the air. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded. He killed a martial ancestor with a single palm strike? As so powerful! On a city gate tower, many people who were already in despair gasped when they saw this scene. Then, they were extremely excited and cheered. Compared to them, the rebel army camp was abnormally quiet. Countless people stared at Yi Chen in shock. The expressions of many powerhouses who did not believe in Yi Chen's achievements changed, especially those who were about to attack. They were glad. Clap! Clap! The acting king's expression was extremely grim. He clapped and sneered. Killing martial ancestor stage masters is like killing dogs. No wonder you have the confidence to go against me. His eyes were filled with sharpness. Unfortunately, I specially prepared an opponent to guard against you. As soon as he said that, he slowly turned around and solemnly cupped his fists at the dense army. Lord Mo Su, I'll leave this person to you. As soon as he finished speaking, the dense army slowly dispersed. The dense army slowly dispersed, and an old man dressed in black bee skin slowly walked out. The old man was around 60 years old. His eyes were dark and fierce, and there was a flame mark between his brows. Although it was a mark, it emitted a bone-chilling coldness. The master of the northern barbarians, Mo Su, Heavenly Barbarian. Chapter 1094. There were many foreign tribes in the great dynasties. Their civilization was not as advanced as the humans in the cities. They even lived a primitive life of starvation. However, it was such a foreign tribe that the great dynasties could not destroy even after spending 1,000 years. Among them, the northern barbarians were the most powerful. The northern barbarians lived in the eastern part of Yuzhou that was filled with miasma. They worshipped gods and used fire as their totem. The spells they cultivated were extremely strange. Among the northern barbarians, the cultivation level was measured by the status of the tribe. Ordinary barbarians were called spiritual barbarians after activating their talent. Above spiritual barbarians were witchcraft barbarians, great barbarians, heavenly barbarians, and divine barbarians. Divine barbarians only existed in legends. Heavenly barbarians only appeared once every few hundred years. Once a heavenly barbarian appeared, it meant that the northern barbarians would reach their peak. 1,000 years ago, the founding emperor of the great dynasties, Lu Sigu, and the state preceptor had killed a heavenly barbarian. That was how they defeated the northern barbarians and chased them to the bitter cold. It was also that battle that caused Lu Sigu's injuries to act up, and he died. At that time, Lu Sigu was the most powerful person in the north. Therefore, Yin Yi was so nervous when she saw the old man appear. Heavenly barbarians represented the martial king stage in martial Dao cultivation. Martial king. He was only one step away from the legendary martial saint. One must know that even in the great dynasties, only the state preceptor, Qi Tiandao, was a martial king. She was not the only one. Even many of the sect powerhouses under the acting king's command had a change of expression when they saw the old man appear. Yi Chen stood with his hands behind his back fearlessly. The moment the old man appeared, he sensed his cultivation base. He could only be considered a quasi-saint on earth. Mo Su, the master of the northern barbarians, ignored everyone's gazes. He then looked up at the acting king. After I kill this person, the northern barbarians want an additional state on top of the original condition. Why? The acting king was furious. Before this, in order to unite the northern barbarians, he promised to give the northern barbarians 2 states to live after he seized the throne. However, the other party wanted an additional state now. One must know that there were only 5 states in the entire great dynasties, but the northern barbarians wanted 3 states. How could he not be furious? Mo Su glanced at Yi Chen and said, "This person is more powerful than I imagined. I'll have to pay a high price to kill him." As soon as he said that, the acting king's expression changed. Clearly, He did not expect that the other party's evaluation of Yi-chan would be so high. Fine. He gritted his teeth. Mo-su then nodded lightly and walked to Yi-chan step by step. Young man, you're very powerful. I don't want to be your enemy. However, I have to fight so that the northern barbarians won't continue to live in this bitter and cold land. I'll give you a chance to attack. If you disappoint me, I'll let you know what despair is. Yi-chan said expressionlessly, as his voice fell, including the acting king, Yun-yi, and the rest. Everyone was stunned, thinking that they had heard wrong. That was an existence equivalent to a martial king. However, Yi-chan said that he would definitely die if he attacked. Mo-su's expression instantly turned cold. It was obvious that he was truly filled with killing intent. What an arrogant brat. With that, the flame mark between his brows began to tremble faintly. At the same time, an extremely dense, vile energy spread out. Following the appearance of this vile energy, the temperature between heaven and earth suddenly dropped by dozens of degrees. Many soldiers standing nearby were instantly turned into popsicles. In an instant, at least thousands of people died. Your Highness, retreat. A powerhouse's expression changed drastically. He protected the acting king and continued to retreat. This is the extraordinary fire seed of the northern barbarians. Once it's fully unleashed, everything within a radius of 3,000 meters will be frozen. Brat, I'll show you the power of the northern barbarian spells, Mo-su said coldly. Then he raised his right hand and clenched his fist into the air. At that moment, a large amount of vile energy gathered in the air. A large amount of vile energy eventually condensed into a gigantic ice fist. As an ear-piercing roar sounded, the gigantic ice fist charged at Yi-chan. Sensing the commotion, Yun-yi's beautiful face turned pale. Mystery, the powerhouse said to the acting king, Your Highness, Mo-su is indeed the heavenly barbarian of the northern barbarians. Even if that brat is a martial king, he will suffer from such methods. Under everyone's gaze, Yi-chan did not move at all. He allowed the gigantic ice fist to approach him. At that moment, he smirked coldly and waved his right hand at the ice fist. Then, the space around the gigantic ice fist started to distort, as if it was tearing the gigantic ice fist apart. Bang! As the air shook violently, the gigantic ice fist that was less than 3 meters away from Yi-chan exploded and turned into starlight that scattered. Whoosh! At that moment, countless people were in an uproar. The powerhouse who spoke earlier was in disbelief. The acting king's expression changed. How is this possible? Mo-su's expression turned grim completely. Yi-chan placed his hands behind his back and looked at the former coldly. I've already given you a chance. You've disappointed me. As soon as he finished speaking, he stretched out his hand and grabbed at Mo-su. Rumble, a gigantic golden dragon claw appeared in the air. It was like a collapsing divine pillar that supported the sky, wanting to completely crush this world. The terrifying pressure caused everyone's hearts to tremble. They felt goosebumps all over their bodies. Holy fire barbarian tattoo, open. Mo-su's expression changed drastically. Then, he roared and pointed at the flame mark between his brows. Buzz! Under everyone's gazes, a white beam of light suddenly shot out from between his brows. The beam of light was like an ice pillar as it charged at the golden dragon claw in the air. Mo-su is going all out. Someone looked at Yi-chan and mumbled, This brat can actually force Mo-su to use the barbarian's life-saving divinity. However, what happened in the next moment shocked him. Mo-su's white beam of light was directly grabbed by Yi-chan's golden dragon claw and exploded on the spot. The golden dragon claw did not slow down and grabbed Mo-su. Ah! Mo-su screamed as his body exploded. Even his soul was shattered by the golden dragon claw. He completely disappeared from the world. For a moment, the entire world was dead silent. The acting king's eyes widened, and his expression froze. Yun-yi covered her red lips lightly, as if she had been petrified. The master of the northern barbarians, Mo-su, died just like that? Too powerful, Too powerful. This person is simply invincible. After the dead silence, there was an earth-shattering gasp. Yun-Yi was so surprised that she almost fainted. Yichen looked straight at the stunned, acting king and the rest in the distance. Then, he took a step forward and appeared before them in a flash. As if sensing his killing intent, the acting king's expression changed. He immediately said, "Senior, let's talk things out. Please listen to me. My mother is from the White Jade capital. You can't touch me." End of this chapter. Chapter 1095. I can't kill you? Yi-chan smiled disdainfully and pressed forward. However, at that moment, Yun-Yi seemed to have thought of something, and her expression changed suddenly. "Mr. Yi, you can't kill him." "Why?" Yi-chan turned around and looked at her. Yun-Yi rushed over and took a deep breath in. If the Great Dynasty and the Qing Dynasty are the two overlords of the northern region, then the White Jade capital is the true master of the northern region. Empress Dowager is right. The acting king seemed to see hope and said hurriedly, "The White Jade capital is a supreme force, also known as the Immortal Sect. They stand in the clouds and look down on the entire northern region. Aren't you the son of the late emperor?" Yi-chan said with a cold smile, "Your mother is also a member of the Great Dynasty. What does she have to do with the White Jade capital?" The acting king trembled violently when he sensed the killing intent in Yi-chan's eyes. He did not dare to hide anything. "My mother was a disciple of the White Jade capital. Back then, the late emperor also went to the White Jade capital to study. Later, he took my mother and left the White Jade capital." Yi-chen looked at Yun-Yi by instinct. Yun-Yi nodded with difficulty. "I've heard of this rumor. The White Jade capital's disciples are not allowed to marry people of the secular world. Therefore, after the late emperor took that woman away, the White Jade capital sent people to the world and forced that woman to death in front of everyone. The late emperor died of depression because of this. This was a secret of the royal family. Only a handful of people knew about it. She had only found out about it from the dusty secret files after she became the Empress Dowager. This was also the reason why the royal family did not dare to force the acting king too much, even though they knew that he wanted a rebel. They were afraid that the White Jade capital would take action." Yi-chen looked at the acting king with a faint smile. "If that's the case, I'm afraid the White Jade capital can't wait for me to kill you, right?" "No." The acting king's face immediately turned pale. "There are many factions in the White Jade capital. My mother was forced to death by the enemy faction. If you kill me, my mother's family will definitely take revenge for me." At this point, he continued, "Also, my mother's family blamed the late emperor for my mother's death, so they secretly ordered me to rebel. Everything I did was ordered by them." Yi-chen's eyes flickered when he heard that. He didn't expect that the civil war of a major dynasty would actually involve so many twists and turns of the past. Seeing that he did not say a word, the acting king thought that he was afraid and said, "Senior, as long as you don't kill me, I will definitely." However, Yi-chan could not be bothered to listen to him begging for mercy. He slapped with his palm and did not hold back at all. He directly erased that person from time to time. "Mr. Yi, you've caused a huge disaster." Yun-Yi faintly sighed. "The acting king is dead?" When they saw the acting king turn into a bloody mist, all the rebel soldiers were shocked and incredulous. "Run! Run quickly!" It was unknown who cried out in alarm, but without saying a word, they all turned into afterimages and fled in all directions. "No one will be able to escape today." Yi-chen scoffed. Subsequently, his divine consciousness spread out in a frenzy. He waved his sleeve, and a purple gleam shot into the sky. Rumble! In an instant, the true martial thousand lightning swords streaked across the sky and directly arrived behind the dozen martial ancestor realm experts, killing them one by one. As for the rest of the defeated army, Yi-chan could not be bothered to intervene. He grabbed Yun-Yi's shoulder and flew into the city directly. In the palace of the Great Dynasty, Yi-chan lifted his hand and set up a barrier. Then he said under Yun-Yi's confused gaze, "Have you seen the ghost ship?" Before this, he had originally planned to leave the northern region through the wormhole. However, he accidentally found out that the ghost ship had appeared in the northern region, and Yun-Yi was a witness. Therefore, that was the reason why he came back to save Yun-Yi this time. As soon as he said that, Yun-Yi took a few steps back subconsciously. Then, she looked at him with hatred. "Who exactly are you?" She looked at Yi-Chun with vigilance, but there was more hatred, as if she was looking at an enemy. Yi-Chun did not expect her attitude to change so drastically. He could not help but frown. "It doesn't matter who I am. You just need to answer my question. You have to know that if I want to harm you, you won't be able to resist. Moreover, I've seen the ghost ship before, and my wife's disappearance is related to the ghost ship." The moment that was said, Yun-Yi's tense expression finally loosened. "Why, you've seen the ghost ship too?" "That's right." Yi-Chun nodded lightly. The hall fell silent immediately. Yun-Yi stared at him as if she was trying to see something. After a while, she smiled bitterly. "Mr. Yi, I believe you." She sat on the chair gently and looked like she was recalling something. "Mr. Yi, I'm sorry. I lied to you. I told you that I've been hiding my feelings since I was young, but I'm not." Yi-Chun said nothing. After all, who did not have a secret? Yun-Yi said softly, "I'm actually the daughter of the king of Hanhai. The king of Hanhai is a sea region between the Great Dynasty and the Qing Dynasty. It's also a tributary of the Tianfeng Sea region. A year and a half ago, I was traveling with my father on the sea with my maidservant. However, I found a ghost ship heading toward us. There were powerhouses fighting on the ship." Yi-Chun could not help but squint when he heard that. A year and a half? If he counted the beginning of the spiritual energy recovery on Earth, it had indeed been more than a year since they parted. That battle was earth-shattering. My father was a martial king, but he was still afraid. At that time, he escorted me away decisively. However, those people discovered us in the end. Some of them came to kill us. My father stayed behind and caused a tsunami. I was swept into the tsunami. At this point, Yun-Yi's brows were filled with fear. When I woke up, I found out that I was saved by a family from the Great Dynasty. Later on, I heard that the Hanhai clan was wiped out overnight. After that, this family was attacked by their political enemies and their property was confiscated. I was also locked up in the Yeo court. Did you see the scene on the ghost ship clearly? Yi-Chun grasped the key information and asked, "For example, how many people were on the ship? Who were the people fighting?" "We were too far away, so we couldn't see clearly." Yin-Yi shook her head and said, "However, there seemed to be a few powerful existences attacking an old man. The old man was protecting a few people at that time. He was like a god of death, killing everywhere." Yi-Chun's eyes focused when he heard that. Was that old man crazy? Were there 3 people behind him? 1 man, 2 women, and a little girl? Just as he finished speaking, Yin-Yi suddenly raised her head and looked at him with a strange gaze. "Mr. Yi, how did you know?" Boom! At that moment, a rumble sounded in Yi-Chun's mind. Endless joy surged within him. It was them. It was really them. Yuhan and his parents. End of this chapter. Chapter 1096. Yi-Chun really did not expect that. Yin-Yi actually saw the ghost ship, and the people on it were Su Yuhan and her parents. Yin-Yi's expression changed slightly, as if she had sensed the change in his state of mind. Then, she said in shock, "Mr. Yi, is your wife on the ship?" Yi-Chun openly admitted it when he met her gaze. "That's right. My wife went missing because of the ghost ship." "Daddy, can we see Mommy now?" The little girl finally understood what the two of them were talking about. She looked at Yi-Chun in anticipation. Yi-Chun smiled softly soon. Yin-Yi's face turned pale when she heard that. She suddenly felt a pain in her heart for no reason. It was as if she had lost something. She took a deep breath in and forced a smile. "But you must be careful, Mr. Yi. The people fighting on the ghost ship were very powerful. I suspect that they are the legendary martial saints." Martial saints, this term was a legend in the northern region and even in the ancient desolate realm. The power they represented was unimaginable. The so-called martial saints were people who had reached the pinnacle of martial Tao. The ancient desolate realm was prosperous in both literature and martial arts. Only martial saints could fight against martial saints. As for martial saints, they were scholars who had become saints. Scholars did not cultivate true energy or their physique. They used literature to cultivate and sense the truth of heaven and earth. A literary grandmaster's physique was not much stronger than a mortal's. They would still catch a cold and cough. However, a word of gold could change the weather, and a painting could trigger lightning. Yun-Yi had never seen a martial saint or a martial saint in her life, even though she was the Empress Dowager of one of the two overlords of the northern region. Yi-Chen's expression was calm when he heard what she said. Although the cultivation systems of the ancient desolate realm and earth were similar, there were differences. They were more ancient and rigorous. Based on the people he killed today, the supreme giant on earth was equivalent to the martial ancestor of the ancient desolate realm. A martial king was equivalent to a quasi-saint on earth. In that case, a martial saint would definitely be equivalent to a saint on earth. More than one or two saints had died in Yi-Chen's hands. Therefore, Yi-Chen only smiled at Yun-Yi's kindness. Even though the ancient desolate realm system was larger and the quality of the martial artists was stronger than on earth, Yi-Chen was not afraid. After all, apart from him, Ying, the patriarch of hell, and Yi Wushuang were all martial saints. He shook his head and said, "Where did this ghost ship appear from? And where did it disappear from? I'm not sure either." Yin-Yi's eyes dimmed. "I only know that I once saw it on the immensity sea. Then I fell into the water and fainted. Since then, it disappeared from the northern region." She wanted to find the ghost ship more than Yi-Chen. This was because she remembered that before she fainted, she had been chased by the powerhouses on the ghost ship. In order to save her, her father had stayed behind to bring up the rear and then disappeared with the ghost ship. No one knew if he was alive or dead. Yi-Chen could not help but feel rather disappointed. The ghost ship's whereabouts were uncertain, but no matter what, it would eventually appear where there was water. However, there was no trace of it in the northern region. This meant that the ghost ship was only passing through the immensity sea. The northern region was not the ghost ship's final destination. Thinking of this, he asked, "Did you just say that the immensity sea is a tributary of the Tianfeng Sea area?" "That's right." Yun-Yi nodded slightly. Then, as if she had guessed what he was thinking, she said, "However, the Tianfeng Sea area is rather special. It borders the northern region, the southern region, the eastern wilderness, the western desert, and the central state at the same time." Yi-Chen could not help but frown. Initially, he had planned to go to the Tianfeng Sea area to investigate the ghost ship. Now that he heard Yun-Yi's words, he was even more confused. The Tianfeng Sea area was connected to the other 4 territories at the same time. Didn't that mean that he had to search them one by one? Right at this moment, a thought flashed through his mind, and he raised his head to look outside the hall. There were people walking towards the barrier he had set up. However, there were several civil officials and a few generals. With a wave of his sleeve, he removed the barrier. Soon, a few people walked in quickly. They heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that Yi-Chen and Yun-Yi's clothes were clean. "Empress Dowager, Misty, the leading general, Yun-Yi, said respectfully to Yi-Chen, "Countless rebels have fled. May I ask if we should give the order to chase after them?" When he said that, everyone, including him, was filled with excitement. They had won this battle. They had defeated hundreds of thousands of soldiers with less than 30,000. And all of this was thanks to one person. Everyone looked at Yi-Chen as they thought to this point. Their eyes were filled with endless respect. At that moment, Yi-Chen was no different from a god to them. He was even considered the guardian of a large sect. Yun-Yi shook her head and said, "General Mo, don't chase after a cornered enemy. Withdraw your troops now. Count the casualties, repair the city walls, and prevent them from returning." They only had 30,000 troops. Even if the rebels fled, they could not chase after them. After all, any small group of rebels would cause great casualties. "Yes." General Mo bowed heavily and hesitated to speak. "Empress Dowager, although the acting king is dead, there are still 7 kings. Moreover, the Grand Preceptor is still fighting against the enemy at the border." Yun-Yi sighed softly. "I understand." Yun-Yi and Yi-Chen stood side by side in Longjing. The two of them quietly looked at the mess after the battle and the countless people who were crying while hugging the corpses. Yun-Yi turned around and asked about the young emperor's whereabouts. However, She was told that the young emperor had returned to the palace and had taken 1,000 troops to protect her. The sect has let you down. I've let you down, and His Majesty has let you down. She bowed deeply to everyone as a stream of tears slowly flowed down her cheeks. On the street, a young man knelt in front of an old man. His face was filled with joy after surviving a calamity. The young man was Ding Peng, who had taken the initiative to climb the city gate tower and protect the front line as an archer. Little Peng has grown up and can protect us. You've really done us proud. That's right. I saw little Peng kill many rebels with my own eyes. There were many commoners surrounding him, praising him in all sorts of ways. Ding Peng immediately revealed a look of surprise. At this moment, a middle-aged woman dressed in festive clothes stepped forward and said with her hands on her waist, "Little Peng, I'm a matchmaker from the east of the city. Just now, Steward Feng from the east of the city told me that he agreed to your marriage with Min Min. He's also willing to give your family 100 acres of fertile land and 2 cows as dowry." As soon as this was said, the crowd burst into an uproar. Many people looked at Ding Peng with envy. Little Peng is in luck. Feng Yuanwai's family is extremely wealthy, especially his daughter. She's not an ordinary beauty. Little Peng is a man who protects the country. If I have a daughter, I'd be willing to marry him. Lame Chun, come on. You're already 50 years old, and you're still an old bachelor. You still have a daughter? Even if you do, she'll definitely be a rotten melon. Little Peng won't like her at all. End of this chapter. Chapter 1097. Ding Peng's face turned red when he heard that. He could not help but recall what Blackie had said before he died. Little Peng, you're still a virgin, right? Promise me Uncle Tai Zhu, don't die. Live well, and ask your grandpa to find a wife for you. The taste of a woman is really wonderful. That white thigh, that to go. Ding Peng's eyes turned hot. He pushed the crowd aside and looked around the street as if he was looking for something. Then, he saw a woman carrying a child in the distance. She was kneeling on a stretcher covered with white cloth. Plop! Ding Peng took a few steps forward and knelt heavily in front of the stretcher. Tears flowed out of his eyes. If Big Blackie hadn't pushed him just now, the one lying on the stretcher would have been him. His life had been exchanged for Blackie's. Blackie had parents and children, and his entire family depended on him to make a living. However, he was willing to give up his life to save Ding Peng, who was single. Sister-in-law, my condolences. Ding Peng looked at the expressionless wife in front of him. His lips moved slightly, and he felt extremely guilty. At this moment, a loud voice came from behind. The Empress Dowager has arrived. Swoosh! The crowd immediately knelt down. Even Ding Peng and the woman were no exception. Yun Yi looked at the corpse on the stretcher with a complicated expression and said to the woman, "The imperial court will be responsible for your family's future. Your child can study in the Royal Academy in the future, and his food and accommodation will be free. Thank you, Empress Dowager." The woman's eyes finally had a glimmer of light. The people around were extremely envious. They hated themselves for hesitating and not joining the army. Yun Yi then looked at Yun Yi with a gentle gaze. "What's your name?" She had a deep impression of Ding Peng. Yun Yi had a deep impression of him. During the tragic battle earlier, the scene of Ding Peng, who had gone crazy because of Blackie's death, killing more than 10 people, attracted her attention. Empress Dowager, I'm called Ding Peng." Ding Peng was extremely nervous. The Empress Dowager actually talked to me. She even asked for my name. The Empress Dowager is so beautiful, like a fairy who has descended to the mortal world. That goddess Yi and the Empress Dowager are really compatible. He could not help but glance at Yi Chun next to Yin Yi. His eyes were filled with admiration. The child in immortal Ye's arms should be born from him and the Empress Dowager, right? Ding Peng. Yun Yi repeated the name several times, then nodded slightly. "Good name. I'll remember you. Go back and wait for the news." She turned around and left with Yi Chun after saying that. An hour later, when the cleanup work was in full swing, a fast horse passed through the crowded streets and went straight to the palace. "Empress Dowager, your majesty." A man dismounted from the horse and panted heavily. The imperial advisor is surrounded and is in grave danger. Please send troops to save him." With that, the man died on the spot. The scene was silent. The imperial tutor was surrounded. Didn't that mean that the border was already on the verge of life and death? Once the enemy country's army of 500,000 broke through, it would be the most serious moment. Yun-Yi looked at Yi Chun with a pleading expression as if she was grasping at straws. "Mr. Yi, fine, I'll make another move." Yi Chun shook his head lightly. Subsequently, he set up a sword gleam and left under everyone's gaze. He had a good impression of Qi Tiandao. Although he was not familiar with him, he was willing to consume his lifespan to deduce Su Yuhan's whereabouts for him the first time they met. Even though he had a request, he seemed to be open and above board. Moreover, Yi Chun had promised to protect the sect for 3 months. Upon seeing this, many ministers praised sincerely, "Mr. Yi is truly a godly person." Yuni looked around and suddenly asked the old eunuch beside her, "Where's His Majesty?" His Majesty said that he's tired and needs to rest. The old eunuch hesitated. At this moment of life and death, His Majesty can actually sleep. He was getting more and more disappointed. At the border of the Great Dynasty, at Tiger Xiong Pass, the enemy country, the Qing Kingdom, led 500,000 troops to attack Tiger Xiong Pass. The imperial tutor, Qi Tiandao, led 200,000 troops to the south to rescue them. The price of 200,000 against 500,000 was that the Great Dynasty failed to defend the city. The 200,000 troops were reduced to less than 50,000 troops, and they were forced to retreat. At that moment, the flames of war had already spread into the pass. Smoke filled the city, and flames shot into the sky. Corpses piled up on the road. In the air, a dozen figures formed a sword formation, surrounding an old man in a purple robe. If one looked closely, they would realize that these figures all emitted the aura of a martial ancestor. The leader was a middle-aged man in white. It was the Qing Kingdom's military advisor, Gu Jinxiu. Gu Jinxiu slashed at the old man in the purple robe. As the sword gleam swept across, Qi Tiandao's expression changed slightly, and he retreated quickly. Today, the number 1 people of the 2 dynasties finally fought, and they were both martial kings. Boom! At the same time, the 12 figures around him shot out 12 sword gleams, sealing off Qi Tiandao's escape route. Boom! Qi Tiandao swept the horsetail whisk in his hand, but he realized that the 12 sword gleams were mutually reinforcing. Every time they were shattered, they would condense again in the blink of an eye. Gu Jinxiu held his sword in the air and said with a faint smile, "Brother Qi, what do you think of my 12 heavenly star sword formation?" The so-called 12 heavenly star sword formation was a formation formed by 12 martial ancestor level sword sons, with him as the sword formation's core. This sword formation was filled with an extremely sharp attack aura. Even martial kings would not be able to get away with it. "Gu Jinxiu, you've hidden it well." Qi Tiandao coughed violently, and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. "In order to deal with me, you've secretly trained 12 sword sons who are at the level of 5 kings. The 8 kings have led 1,000,000 troops to the capital of your great dynasty, and I've led 500,000 troops to hold you back." Gu Jinxiu waved his hand gently, and the 12 sword sons dispersed. Only then did he say, "Brother Qi, your sect is completely finished this time. Why are you still struggling? My sect has its own destiny. It's not something that the Qing Kingdom can destroy just because you want to." Qi Tiandao was like an old man with 1 foot in the grave, and his gaze was very calm. His calmness made Gu Jinxiu secretly frown. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. "That's right, I've forgotten someone. This person's name is Mad Southern Yi. Do you think that this person can come and save you?" Speaking to this point, he could not help but reveal a look of pity. "I have a 12 heavenly cycle star sword formation. Even if this Mad Southern Yi is a martial king, he can't save you. Give up." Cough, cough, cough. Qi Tiandao's aura was weak, but his thin and weak body did not move at all. "I believe in destiny. I believe in Mr. Yi. Send the great grand imperial advisor on his way." Gu Jinxiu bowed heavily. As soon as he finished speaking, the 12 sword sons around him quickly changed their positions. The sword formation suddenly changed, and in the end, it actually turned into a giant sword that slashed toward Qi Tiandao. Previous emperors, I try my best. Qi Tiandao closed his eyes slightly. This existence that had protected the sect for 1,000 years was now an arrow at the end of its flight. If such a loyal person were born in the Qing kingdom, perhaps I could still be friends with you. What a pity, Gu Jinxiu sighed softly. Just as the giant light sword was about to slash Qi Tiandao's body, it suddenly stopped, as if a pair of invisible hands had grabbed it. At the same time, an extremely calm voice suddenly exploded like a clap of thunder. If you want to kill him, you have to first ask for my opinion. End of this chapter. Chapter 1098. This voice was like the might of heaven and earth, shaking the surroundings. This voice spread to every corner of the void. Even the soldiers on both sides who were fighting fiercely on the ground stopped at this moment. Fellow Yi, Qi Tiandao suddenly opened his eyes, and a hint of surprise and gratification flashed across his eyes. At this moment, he really wanted to laugh. Laugh out loud. Qi Tiandao was right. Yi Chun was the hope of the dynasty. Is he really here? Gu Jinxiu narrowed his eyes and hurriedly urged the 12 sword sons, "Kill him quick." After saying that, his gaze fixed on the void, trying to find the whereabouts of the person who spoke. The 12 sword sons activated their full strength, trying to control the giant sword in the sky to slash Qi Tiandao. At the next moment, as space distorted, a figure suddenly appeared behind Qi Tiandao. The person reached out and gently grabbed the tip of the sword. Rumble, the gigantic sword shattered with a loud bang. Blurg, the 12 sword sons spat blood at the same time, and their bodies flew out uncontrollably. Only after they stabilized themselves did they look at the person who had attacked them with faces full of shock. It was a white-haired young man with a cold expression. He was carrying a 6-year-old girl in one hand and had the other hand behind his back. At that moment, Gu Jinxiu's expression changed, and his eyes were filled with shock. One strike. With just one strike, their formation was broken, and the 12 martial masters were severely injured. Even he could not do such a thing. He stared at Yi Chun as he thought to this point. Then, he cupped his fist slightly. Are you mad, Southerny? He had heard of Yi Chen's name through his spies earlier. He thought it was an exaggeration, but he did not expect it to be even more terrifying than the rumors said. Yi Chen glanced at him calmly. Since you know it's me, you should lead your troops and scram now. As expected of the mad Southern, hearing such arrogant words, not only was Gu Jinxiu not angered, a hint of admiration appeared in his eyes instead. Fellow Yi, as far as I know, you're not from the dynasty. Why do you have to interfere in the matter between our two countries? Speaking of this, he said with incomparable sincerity, as long as you leave, whatever the great dynasties can give, the Qing kingdom can also give. I'm only here for the promise. It has nothing to do with benefits. Yi Chen chuckled softly. Gu Jinxiu immediately revealed a regretful expression upon hearing this, but he did not back down. In that case, I can only offend you. With that, the long sword on his back began to tremble faintly, as if it could be unsheathed at any time. Yi Chen squinted slightly with a terrifying gaze. I only have one chance to attack you. Are you sure you want to attack? Meeting his gaze, Gu Jinxiu's heart faintly trembled. He then smiled bitterly and said, I am an official of the Qing kingdom. Dying for the Qing kingdom is my mission. Clang, with a sword hum that shook the 9 heavens, a dazzling sword light bloomed behind him. Yi Chen shook his head lightly. Just when he was about to attack, Qi Tiandao, who was next to him, suddenly said, Fellow Yi, this is a fated battle between you and me. I hope you won't interfere. Are you sure? Yi Chen could not help but look at him. At that moment, the vitality in his body had been exhausted. The reason why he had survived until now was all due to his perseverance. If he sat down and recuperated, he might be able to live for a few more days with Yi Chen's medicinal pills. I'm sure. As if he had guessed what he was thinking, Qi Tiandao smiled calmly. I've been fighting with Brother Gu for many years. It's time to end it before my time is up. As soon as he said that, He took a step forward and instantly leaped over 30 meters, heading straight for Gu Jinxiu. He laughed loudly and said, "Brother Gu, do you dare to fight me? Why wouldn't I?" Gu Jinxiu also laughed loudly and took the initiative to welcome him with his sword. Almost at that moment, the 12 Sword Sons seemed to want to help, but they realized that Yi Chun had glanced at them. Just that glance alone shocked them. It was as if they were being watched by a ferocious beast, and they did not dare to move at all. Rumble. In the air, Gu Jinxiu and Qi Tiandao officially fought. The two of them no longer concealed their auras and attacked with all their might. This was a battle between the number 1 person of a major dynasty and the number 1 person of a Qing dynasty. It was also a battle between 2 countries. The armies of both countries stared at this scene. An extremely dense purple sun rose up in the sky, welcoming the terrifying sword wills that were coming at it. An hour later, the 2 figures looked at each other from afar. Gu Jinxiu stood proudly in the air with his sword in hand. He looked at Qi Tiandao from afar and said, "You've lost." Someone saw that his right hand, which was holding the sword, was trembling nonstop. Dark red blood flowed down from his wrist and dyed the sword red. "Yes, I've lost." A smile appeared at the corner of Qi Tiandao's lips, "But I see a new emperor rising. One day, he will sweep through the ancient desolate realm like a prairie fire." He fell heavily from the sky after saying that. Yi Chun took a step forward and caught him from the air. Sensing the former's eyes, his expression was a little complicated. "Do you have any last words?" The Emperor's star descends to the south. The true dragon returns to the leaf. Qi Tiandao held on to his last breath and looked at Yi Chun calmly. "If my sect has let you down, you can replace me. Be careful of the white jade capital." After saying that, he stopped breathing. Grand Preceptor. On the ground, the remaining tens of thousands of imperial troops knelt on one knee, their faces filled with sorrow. The Grand Preceptor had protected their sect for 1,000 years. Today's legend had finally come to an end. At the same time, the 12 Sword Sons rushed towards Gu Jinxiu. One of them said, "Master, Qi Tiandao is dead. There's no one else in the sect. Why don't we take this opportunity?" Gu Jinxiu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Go quickly, retreat." Although the 12 Sword Sons were unwilling, they knew that their master was also seriously injured, so they immediately gave the order to retreat. Yi Chun did not stop them from leaving. Instead, he carried Qi Tiandao's body and flew towards Longjing. On the way less than 100 kilometers away from Longjing, the weather suddenly changed. It was clearly the end of spring, but it was snowing heavily. The snow got heavier and heavier. In the end, it covered a radius of 100 kilometers, including Longjing, into a world of ice and snow. The snow was extremely strange. In just an hour, more than 1,000 people had frozen to death. Even the people who had lived in Longjing for generations had never seen such abnormal weather. Yi Chun, on the other hand, stopped in his tracks. Murderous intent. He could feel a strong, murderous intent from this endless snow. His gaze shot into the sky and realized that the snow did not fall from the clouds in the sky. Instead, it appeared silently from the void. When he arrived at Longjing, he saw that everyone, including Yun Yi, were standing on the city wall, looking to the west. There was a small boat floating in the air. The boat did not have a mast, and it was snow white. There was not a single person on it. However, there was a melodious sound of a flute coming from the boat. The temperature in this area became colder. "White Jade Capital?" Yun Yi was almost trembling as she said in fear, "The White Jade Capital's envoy is here." End of this chapter. Chapter 1099. White Jade Capital. The White Jade Capital's envoy is here. Above Longjing, Yun Yi's body trembled. Her face was extremely pale as she looked at the small boat floating from the west. The sound of the flute was long and melodious, but it was incomparably cold, as if it made this world of ice and snow even sharper. Although the people behind him did not know the origin of the boat, they could sense that it was extraordinary, and they looked extremely nervous. Yi Chun carried Qi Tiandao's corpse and stared at the boat for a few seconds. Then, he landed on the city wall in a flash. Mr. Yi, the Grand Preceptor. Yun Yi's face turned pale as she looked at the corpse in Yi Chen's hand. Her voice was trembling. He took advantage of the end of his life to heavily injure the Qing Kingdom's military advisor, Gu Jinxiu, and come into contact with a border crisis. Yi Chen said calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Yi fell heavily to the ground. Yun Yi fell heavily to the ground, unable to hold back her tears. State Preceptor, rest in peace. Grand Preceptor. At this moment, everyone on the city wall knelt heavily on the ground, their faces filled with grief. The Grand Preceptor was dead. The protector who had protected them for 1,000 years had finally died for the sect. Whoosh! At the same time, the small boat floating in the air was getting closer and closer. Mr. Yi, the White Jade Capital's envoy is here. Our sect is completely finished. Yun Yi's expression changed drastically. Is this the White Jade Capital you told me about before? Yi Chen stared at the approaching boat as his eyes flickered. Before the acting king of the 8 kings died, he had said that his mother was from the White Jade Capital and threatened Yi Chen not to kill him. There's a legend in the northern region. Yun Yi bit her lip and said with great difficulty, that is, when a small boat floating in the snow appears, the country it appears and will be destroyed. There are many dynasties in the northern region, but no matter how powerful they are, as long as this small boat appears in the country, they will be destroyed. Even the sects and the Qing Kingdom are no exception. Yi Chen could not help but take a deep look at the small boat that was less than 3,000 meters away from them when he heard that. Gradually, he was able to see some clues. There was nothing wrong with the small boat, but the problem was with the fluttering sounds. The fluttering sounds were the key to triggering the snowstorm phenomenon. He looked around the city again and found that almost every household had their doors closed and were burning firewood to keep themselves warm. At this rate, everyone in the city would be frozen to death in less than a month under the cold winter snow. No wonder it could wipe out a country. Mr. Yi, don't say anything later. Leave everything to me. At that moment, Yun Yi suddenly lifted her head and looked at Yi Chen. She said with concern, you killed the acting king. They're definitely here to punish you. Let me see if there's any room for negotiation. Although she said that, she didn't have the slightest bit of confidence in her heart. White Jade Capital. Such an existence in the Kunlun ruins was no different from a land of immortals. Very few people knew of their existence. However, it also existed in the hearts of the supreme rulers of the dynasties, and was regarded as a transcendent existence that stood above all living beings in the northern region. Yi Chen said nothing. Ever since he started cultivating, he had never retreated from anything, and he did not regret killing the acting king. When Yun Yi saw his expression, she became anxious. She was afraid that he would offend the White Jade Capital's messenger. Not long after, the small boat stopped less than 30 meters away from them. As the fluttering sounds disappeared, a figure slowly walked out from the cabin. It was a person wearing a bamboo hat. No one could see his face clearly, let alone tell if he was a man or a woman. The only thing that was eye-catching was the green flute in his hand. With the appearance of this person, the temperature between heaven and earth seemed to drop by dozens of degrees. Yun Yi took a deep breath in and suppressed the fear in her heart. She bowed to the man and said, Empress Dowager Yun Yi of the Great Dynasty greets the Lord Envoy. Do you know why I'm here? The man in the bamboo hat raised his eyes slightly and sized up the world. His tone was like a god looking down on all living beings, causing one to shudder. As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Yi's heart sank. She hurriedly said, Lord Envoy, please listen to my explanation. Did I allow you to speak? The man in the bamboo hat snorted coldly. The next moment, Yun Yi felt as if a mountain had fallen on her, causing her to spit out a mouthful of blood. Her face was extremely pale. Impudent! How dare you injure the Empress Dowager? A martial ancestor realm fighter flew into a rage. His figure flashed as he suddenly attacked the man in the bamboo hat. The others were also extremely furious. The man in the bamboo hat only glanced at him. Just one glance. The space around the martial ancestor realm fighter suddenly condensed and compressed his body into a bloody mist. The entire process was completed in the blink of an eye. Dead silence. The entire place was dead silent. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared at the man in the bamboo hat. Their eyes were filled with deep fear and shock. He killed a martial ancestor realm fighter with just a glance? At this moment, they finally realized that the man in the bamboo hat's strength was probably beyond their imagination. After seeing the martial ancestor realm fighter die, Yun-Yi slightly closed her eyes, her expression sorrowful. However, she did not dare to speak. She did not dare to complain at all. This was because the man in the bamboo hat was a messenger from the White Jade capital. Putting aside the significance of the White Jade capital in the northern region, the man's terrifying strength was not something they could contend with. Who killed that piece of trash? The man in the bamboo hat asked slowly. He did not even look at the bloody mist in the air. It was as if he had just killed an ant. However, the entire place was silent. No one answered him. Many people looked at him with fear in their eyes, but most of them were filled with resentment. It was one thing for the man in the bamboo hat to kill someone over a disagreement. He had even forced the Empress Dowager to kneel before him. How could they not be enraged? No one can speak. The man in the bamboo hat did not get angry. Instead, he laughed. Then, he suddenly grabbed the air at the person closest to him. Since you're unwilling to speak, then you might as well be dead. The person immediately felt an irresistible and terrifying suction force. Then he was uncontrollably shot toward the man in the bamboo hat. The man in the bamboo hat lifted him into the air. Are you going to speak or not? The man struggled violently in the air. His face was as red as a pig's liver. He continued to sneer. I don't understand what you're saying. Very well. The man in the bamboo hat nodded lightly. Nobody could tell if he was happy or angry. Don't worry. After you die, I'll bury everyone in the city with you. Killing intent flashed through his eyes after saying that. At that moment, an extremely cold voice came from the side. I'll give you a chance. Let's see if you can kill this man before me. As soon as that was said, Yun-Yi's body trembled violently. She felt like all the energy in her body had been sucked out. Despair filled her face. P.S. To explain the reason why I didn't update yesterday. I was visiting a relative with a new car and accidentally hit the fence by the roadside. I've been negotiating with the insurance company until late at night. I sent the car to Shirley for repairs before the sun rose this morning and only returned at night. I'm sorry to everyone. I'll update as usual tomorrow. End of this chapter. Chapter 1100. I'll give you a chance to. Let's see if you can kill this person in front of me. Under everyone's gaze, Yichen stood up slowly. Yun-Yi was on the verge of breaking down as she tried to persuade him. Mr. Yi, this has nothing to do with you. Go back now. That's right, Mr. Yi. The acting king died in defeat. It has nothing to do with you. The others also spoke up one after another, their faces filled with anxiety. Although no one knew who the man in the bamboo hat was apart from Yun-Yi, they could tell from the way he killed a martial master with a raise of his eyes. Such an existence was definitely not inferior to Yichen or someone more powerful than him. Yichen smiled lightly at everyone's persuasion and walked toward the man in the bamboo hat slowly. The man in the bamboo hat looked at Yichen quietly. He realized that he could not see through Yichen's background with his cultivation base. It was as if Yichen was an ordinary person. He could not help but sneer as he thought to this point. Do you dare to repeat what you just said? Although that was what he said, his eyes were filled with dense, killing intent. He was a member of the White Jade capital. To the northern region, he was like a god that stood in the clouds. Now, an ant had taken the initiative to provoke him. Lord Envoy, can you listen to me? Yun-Yi bit the bullet and said, This has nothing to do with. Before he could finish, he saw Yichen's expression remain unchanged. He extended his hand slowly. Hand him to me, and I'll leave your corpse intact. The moment that was said, everyone fell silent. Yun-Yi was in complete despair. The other party was the White Jade capital's envoy. Brat, you're courting death. After a few seconds of silence, the man in the bamboo hat emitted extreme, killing intent. Not only will this person die today, but all of you will die too. With that, he suddenly slapped the person in his hand. However, In the next moment, he realized that when his hand was about to touch the person in his hand, it suddenly shook violently. It was as if there was an invisible force in the air that was restraining him tightly. You actually hid your cultivation base? The man in the bamboo hat suddenly looked at Yi Chun. No wonder you dare to speak to me in such a tone. But so what? Anyone who dares to offend the white jade capital will die, no matter who you are. Rumble. As his voice fell, the aura on his body increased. The aura on his body grew stronger, and the cold air within a radius of 1,000 feet instantly froze. The snowflakes in the air were completely still. It was as if he was standing there, and the area around him was his domain, controlling everything. Peak Martial King. Yin Yi's expression was one of shock. Above Martial King was Martial Sage. As for Peak Martial Kings, they had already come into contact with the laws of heaven and earth. When they stood within their domains, they were impenetrable and unbreakable. They were truly undefeatable. Some of the Wuzongs present were even more shocked. Faced with such an aura, they discovered that the true energy in their bodies had been frozen. It was as if they had become ordinary people, unable to move at all. However, to everyone's disbelief, Yi Chun was still taking a stroll in his opponent's domain. He shook his head and said, "Is that all you're capable of?" Surprise flashed through the man in the bamboo hat's eyes. Clearly, he did not expect Yi Chun to not react at all under his territory. However, he immediately sneered and lightly waved the green flute in his hand. Boom! At that moment, the frozen ice and snow in the void instantly connected together. From afar, it looked like a huge piece of steel. Die! The man in the bamboo hat shouted softly. The torrent of ice and snow around him charged at Yi Chun instantly. Even the void collapsed because of the might. Mr. Yi. Yin Yi's heart was in her throat. Yi Chun's expression remained the same. He used his finger as a saber and slashed at the air gently. Crack, crack, crack. Soon after, everyone heard the faint sound of glass shattering. Then they saw the ice that filled the sky shatter. With Yi Chun as the center, a white waterfall that was 30 meters wide pierced through, splitting the space into two. I didn't expect there to be a talent like you in the northern region. What a surprise. The man in the bamboo hat's expression finally changed slightly. He looked at Yi Chun with a grim gaze. If you kneel down and acknowledge me as your master now, I might spare your life. You talk too much. Yi Chun scoffed coldly. He took a step forward, and the air rippled. Subsequently, he struck out with his palm like a mountain rising from the ground. Martial spirits light. At that moment, the man in the bamboo hat had goosebumps all over his body. Then he roared. Under everyone's gazes, a tiger's roar suddenly came from within his body. Then, a tiger's silhouette shot out from within his body. The tiger silhouette was about 300 meters long. Its limbs were strong and powerful, and its pressure was unparalleled. With a leap, it took the initiative to meet Yi Chun's palm. Yi Chun's expression was calm. He still struck out with his palm. A huge palm print swept across the sky like the heaven-flipping seal. It suppressed the tiger silhouette directly. Bang! The tiger silhouette was instantly destroyed, and the remaining palm print landed on the man in the bamboo hat. Blurg! The man in the bamboo hat spat out a mouthful of blood and fell heavily to the ground. Cracks instantly appeared on his body, and his face looked like he had seen a ghost. What martial Tao is this? At the next moment, Yi Chun took a step forward and charged at him. The man's expression changed drastically when he saw that, and he hurriedly said, "You can't kill me. I'm the White Jade Capital's envoy." At that moment, he finally realized that Yi Chun's background might not be that simple. However, Yi Chun ignored his threat and pierced his head with a finger. The man's soul took the opportunity to form as if he was trying to escape. However, Yi Chun would not give him the chance. He exerted force in his palm and grabbed at the man's soul. The soul was terrified and could not help but roar, "Elder, save me, save me." Almost at that moment, an extremely cold voice suddenly exploded in the air. "Brat, how dare you?" Boom! Suddenly, a huge hand descended from the sky and slapped down heavily. "I've been waiting for you for a long time. You finally can't take it anymore. Yichen crushed the man in the bamboo hat's shunhan. His body flashed, and he threw a punch at the huge hand. Rumble. The entire space shook violently, and a muffled groan could be faintly heard. When everyone reacted, they realized that the huge hand in the sky had disappeared. Replacing it was a large amount of blood mist that scattered down. However, the surroundings were dead silent. Everyone stared blankly at this scene, especially Yin Yi. Her face was filled with disbelief. The White Jade Capital's envoy died, just like that? And what was that mysterious giant hand? Was it the most powerful person in the White Jade Capital? At that moment, Yichen leaped and shot into the green clouds directly. Yun, he said instinctively, "Misty, I'll go meet this so-called White Jade Capital. You guys stay here and wait for me to come back." Yichen's voice appeared in her mind. Subsequently, Yun, Yi, and the rest moved like ghosts. Misty Yi was going to kill his way into the White Jade Capital? Wasn't that too crazy? In the depths of the void, Yichun carried his daughter and stepped into the sky. There was a divine light in his eyes that pierced through the void. The appearance of the huge hand earlier had exposed the location of the White Jade Capital. It was in the 9th heaven. End of this chapter. Chapter 1101. Above the clouds, in the darkness, a massive island sat in the void. If an ordinary person saw it, they would definitely be so shocked that they would be speechless. The island was like a city in outer space. Cranes cried out in unison, and there were also countless beasts galloping around. As the saying went, the White Jade Capital in the sky had 12 buildings and 5 cities. Immortals caressed my head, and I received eternal life. This was where the White Jade Capital was located. At that moment, an old man with white eyebrows grunted in a celestial mountain in the White Jade Capital. He pulled back his severed right arm and spat out blood. There was a basin of water before him. He had pulled his arm out of the water, but the water in the basin was already dyed red with blood. How powerful! The old man with white eyebrows ignored his pain. He looked extremely shocked. This person must be a martial saint. Why is there such a ferocious person in the north? I've offended this person for the sake of a disciple. With this person's methods, he'll definitely be able to track me down. He might even cause great trouble for the White Jade Capital. Looks like I'll have to meet the Supreme Elder. He's the most suitable person to deal with this. The old man with white eyebrows' expression changed a few times as he thought to there. He immediately turned into a streak of light and flew toward the highest mountain. It was a snowy mountain that was so tall that one could not see its end. If one looked closely, one would realize that it looked like a giant finger. Ordinary people would not be able to reach the top, even if they tried their best. At the top of the mountain was a vast expanse of whiteness, as if it was a world of ice and snow. In the middle of it, there was an old man wearing a straw cape, sitting upright without moving. The old man seemed to be fishing, and there was a huge cave of ice before him. However, what was shocking was that there was no thread or hook in his hand. Instead, there was a long white thread that shot out of his hand and into the cave of ice. At that moment, a streak of light landed on the top of the mountain. It was the old man with white eyebrows. The old man with white eyebrows knelt on one knee and said, "Supreme Elder, the White Jade Capital has provoked a great enemy." However, the old man before him remained motionless like an ice sculpture that would not melt for 1,000 years. The old man with white eyebrows gritted his teeth and told the old man everything that had happened. A few seconds later, a faint sigh was heard. A great dynasty? A young expert suspected to be a martial saint. Surprisingly, the motionless old man slowly turned his head and looked at him expressionlessly. Exactly. The white-browed old man hurriedly nodded. The next moment, the straw-caped old man slowly stretched out his hand, and the old man was horrified to discover a horrifying power of the world attacking him. A mountain suddenly descended from the void. His entire body was smashed down from the sky by the huge mountain, and in the end, he was completely suppressed under the mountain, with only his head sticking out. The commotion shocked everyone in the White Jade Capital. The white-browed old man was horrified. "Supreme Elder, why is that? Do you still remember my words?" The straw-caped old man's calm voice rang out in the young man's mind. I've said this before. The founding master of the great dynasty has a history with a white jade capital. Anyone from the white jade capital mustn't pressure him too much. Although I've been fishing here for 1,000 years, do you really think that I don't know all of this? Hearing this, the white-browed elder felt extremely regretful. Although the matter regarding the acting king was not his own intention and had been done by his follower, how could he not have tacitly agreed to it? The straw-caped old man's voice rang out again. I'll suppress you for 100 years as a punishment. Do you submit? I submit. The white-browed old man was filled with regret. The straw-caped old man withdrew his gaze and looked quietly into the ice cave. He mumbled, a young expert suspected to be a martial saint. This person is definitely not from the northern region. Could he be the demon that has caused a commotion in the southern region recently? Or is he someone from one of the supreme sects in the Central Plains? His eyes flickered. At that moment, he seemed to sense something and smiled. Fellow cultivator, since you're here, why don't you come up and have a seat? As soon as he finished speaking, the many white jade capital experts at the foot of the mountain were shocked, and they all looked toward the white jade capital's barrier passage. There, they saw a white-haired young man walking over slowly with a little girl in his arms. His white hair was like a chain that could turn all living things upside down. Just as someone tried to stop him, the straw-caped old man calmly said, "An esteemed guest has arrived. All of you, step back." Yes, everyone agreed immediately. Yichan looked around the white jade capital calmly. Eventually, he took a step forward and landed next to the straw-caped old man at the top of the mountain. "Fellow, please wait for me for 15 minutes. I've waited for this little serpent for hundreds of years." The straw-caped old man smiled and looked into the ice cave again. The sound of a serpent could be faintly heard. Snow serpent. Yichan also looked into the ice cave. He squinted slightly as surprise flashed through his eyes. The so-called snow serpent was a serpent that lived under ice and snow. The blood of such a creature was incomparably precious. It could help one temper one's body and blood. "Fellow, you know about this?" The straw-caped old man's eyes gleamed. At that moment, his fear of Yichan grew. After all, snow serpents were extremely rare. Only a handful of people in the world knew about them. Roar! At that moment, the sound of the serpent in the ice cave became even more intense. Then, the hard ice layer broke open, and a white serpent that was more than 60 meters long broke out of the ice. The white serpent roared at the straw-caped old man repeatedly, as if it was filled with resentment. If one took a closer look, they would notice that the white thread in the old man's hand had passed through its mouth. 1,000 years ago, you little serpent took advantage of the fact that I was lazy to hide in the ice layer. The straw-caped old man shook his head slightly and seemed to be scolding it jokingly. "I've been using true energy and medicinal pills to nurture you day and night. Now, I just want to take a little of your serpent blood to go with my wine. Are you that unwilling?" "I want freedom." The white serpent spoke in human language. It was a female voice, and it was very angry. "For the past 1,000 years, you've been taking my serpent blood to go with your wine every once in a while. Are you treating me as a long-term meal ticket?" "Ha ha!" The straw-caped old man immediately laughed out loud when he heard that. "Don't worry. I guarantee that this will be the last time. I'll set you free after taking it. The fellow beside me can testify." The white serpent looked at Yi Chun vigilantly. It seemed to have sensed that he was not to be trifled with. It then asked the old man to take out a portion of the serpent blood and put it in the ice pot. "Go, it's best if you head east." The old man put away the thread in the white serpent's mouth. The white serpent let out a long roar and shot out. It was really heading east. The old man raised his hand and waved. 2 stools and a wine set appeared in front of him. He carefully poured the serpent blood in the ice pot and mixed it with a secret wine. He waved his hand, and a cup of blood-red serpent blood wine landed next to Yi Chun. "Fellow, do you dare to drink this cup?" End of this chapter. Chapter 11:02. Yi Chun smiled lightly and put down the little girl in his embrace. He then finished the cup of wine brewed with flood dragon blood. As soon as the flood dragon blood entered his throat, it turned into a bone-piercing chill that flowed through his limbs and finally into his stomach. Great wine! He could not help but nod in admiration. Seeing that, the little girl picked up the empty cup and licked it with her tongue. Her eyes lit up immediately. "Daddy, I want to drink too." Before Yi-chan could say anything, the old man shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Not everyone can drink my wine." The flood dragon blood wine was cold and strong. Although it had been diluted, even an ordinary martial king would not be able to tolerate the energy in a single drop. Yet, the little girl wanted to drink it too. "Grandpa, don't laugh." The little girl was a little unhappy. She glared at the old man and turned around to act coquettishly to Yi-chan. "Daddy, I want to drink too." Yi-chan then looked at the old man in the straw cape. The latter hesitated for a moment and poured a cup for the little girl in the end. He could not help but say, "Fellow, this wine is extraordinary." Before he could finish, he noticed that the little girl had picked up the wine cup and gulped it down. After that, she even wiped her mouth and looked at the former in anticipation. The old man's expression froze, but he still poured another cup for the little girl. The little girl still gulped it down and burped. She raised her little face and looked at the former. "Grandpa, is there more?" "And no more." The old man in the straw cape hurriedly covered the ice pot. His face twitched, and he was shocked. Even he could only drink 5 cups of this wine at once. Otherwise, he would not be able to resist the energy in the flood dragon blood. He could completely understand that Yi-chan could drink 1 cup with his ability. However, the 6-year-old girl drank 2 cups in a row. It shocked him. He had no idea that the little girl had been eating Yi-chan's medicinal pills like candy since she was young. Coupled with a drop of Yi-chan's heart blood protecting her, her physique had been changed subtly. Looking at the little girl's pitiful eyes, the old man hid the kettle well. He then looked at Yi-chan and coughed. "My disciple has no intention of offending you. I apologize to you." From the moment Yi-chan came in, he had been observing Yi-chan. Although he could not sense any aura from Yi-chan at all, he could not help but feel a chill down his spine. But the more it was like this, the more he feared it. Yi-chan looked at him quietly and smiled lightly. "If I'm not mistaken, you're the White Jade Capital's patriarch, right?" The straw-caped old man poured him another cup of wine and pushed it over. "I'm Yu Jingzi, the White Jade Capital's Grand Supreme Elder. May I know who you are?" "Grandpa, didn't you say that you don't have any left?" "Liar, you're a liar." The little fellow immediately rushed over angrily. Yu Jingzi was speechless. Yi-chan said calmly, "So it's fellow Yu Jing. I'm Mad Southern Yi. I'm just passing by the northern region and have some connections with the great dynasty. Your disciple spoke rudely to me and even attacked me. That's why I killed him." He could sense Yu Jingzi's kindness, which caused the killing intent that he had accumulated to dissipate. That was how he was. "If you respect me, I'll respect you 10 times. So it's fellow Yi." Yu Jingzi smiled and said, "Fellow Yi, I'm sure you're not from the northern region, right? May I know where you're from?" He did not hide the probing tone in his words. After all, at his level, it would be easier for both parties to be suspicious if he was being secretive. Moreover, Yi-chan's youth surprised him. He had never seen such a monstrous existence in the northern region. "That's right." Yi-chan nodded lightly and did not say much. Instead, he went straight to the point and said, "I'll get straight to the point. I'm here to make sure that the White Jade Capital won't attack the Great Dynasty in the future. Otherwise, I wouldn't mind seeking your guidance today." At this point, the smile on his face gradually turned cold. "Fellow Yi, you might not know this, but the founding emperor of the Great Dynasty was once a disciple of the White Jade Capital." He thought that Yu Jingzi would not be able to reveal it, but the latter nodded in agreement. Therefore, the Great Dynasty is also considered a part of the White Jade Capital. The reason for this misunderstanding is that my disciple didn't know about it. That's for the best. Yi-chan nodded and suddenly changed the topic. "Other than that, I have a question that I hope you can answer. Of course, I won't let you suffer a loss. Naturally, I'll compensate you." A purple medicinal pill appeared in his hand. The medicinal pill's fragrance spread everywhere, and there was a faint dragon and tiger phenomenon. This pill is called the Spirit Void Pill. It can increase your cultivation base. As soon as that was said, Yu Jingzi's expression changed. May I know what you don't understand? Yi Chun said, a year and a half ago, a netherworld ship appeared on the northern region's vast ocean. May I ask if you've seen it? As soon as he finished speaking, Yu Jingzi's calm pupils constricted slightly. Yu Jingzi's calm pupils constricted slightly. He then looked at Yi Chun steadily. Fellow, are you from Zhongzhou? Why do you say that? Yi Chun was delighted and said, I'm from the Tianfeng Sea area, not Zhongzhou. Yu Jingzi took a deep look at him, then looked at the Spirit Void Pill. After a few seconds of silence, he said, Since that's the case, I advise you not to ask about this matter, fellow Taoist. Otherwise, it'll only bring disaster upon you. He was the master of the White Jade Capital and the Northern Region's #1. His cultivation base had long reached the martial saint stage. However, he still could not forget what happened a year and a half ago. Yi Chun secretly frowned. His tone was slightly cold. Fellow, I have to know about this. I hope you can help me. Yu Jingzi's reaction proved that he did know about the ghost ship. How could Yi Chun miss this opportunity at a time like this? He had already done his etiquette. If Yu Jingzi refused to tell him, he did not mind attacking. As if sensing the coldness in his words, Yu Jingzi sighed softly. Fellow, can you swear that you won't implicate me if I tell you? He was unwilling to fight Yi Chun. Firstly, he did not know Yi Chun's cultivation base. He vaguely felt that Yi Chun gave him a sense of danger. Secondly, he did not know Yi Chun's background. Yi Chun's eyes focused when he heard that. He did not expect a martial saint to be so afraid. He immediately said, I can swear that I won't implicate you. Otherwise, I'll be destroyed by the heavens and abandoned by the gods. With that, he flicked his finger, and the Spirit Void Pill landed in Yu Jingzi's hand. Yu Jingzi waved his sleeve, and the scene before them changed. When they appeared again, they were already in a sealed cave abode. This is my place of closed-door cultivation. There's a formation around it that can avoid the detection of those existences. Yu Jingzi took a deep breath in and said slowly, Fellow Yi, I've indeed seen that netherworld ship. End of this chapter. Chapter 1103. Fellow Taoist Yi, this old man has indeed seen that netherworld ship. In the secret chamber, Yi Chun's eyes were fixed on Yu Jingzi as soon as he finished speaking. He was right. Yu Jingzi was the supreme elder of the White Jade Capital, a giant in the northern region. He was also the only martial saint in the northern region. Even the slightest disturbance in the northern region could not escape his eyes. He didn't say a word and motioned for Yu Jingzi to continue. 1.5 years ago, someone from my White Jade Capital reported that an underworld ship had appeared on the vast sea. Yu Jingzi took a deep breath and said, as if he was reminiscing, I didn't plan to pay attention to this matter, but at that time, several great figures from the Central Plains came to the northern region and forced me to use the power of the sect to help them. The important figures of the Central Plains. Yi Chun squinted slightly. Not bad. Yu Jingzi nodded slightly. These people's origins are very mysterious, and their strength is extremely terrifying. Even I can't be certain of their identities, but I can roughly guess where they come from. These people are all martial saints. Yi Chun frowned. The martial saints of the ancient barren world were no different from the saints on earth. In China, other than him and Ying, only Zi Qingcong of the Kunlun ruins had reached the Saint Plane. These 5 people are martial sages. This old man has never come into contact with them before. However, due to the circumstances, I had no choice but to send people to search for them. Yu Jingzi gently nodded. In the end, they found the whereabouts of the underworld ship in the western part of the vast sea. The 5 of them directly joined hands and killed their way onto the underworld ship. As soon as he said that, Yi Chun's heart skipped a beat. The 5 saints joined hands to attack the netherworld ship. Even with his peak combat power on Earth, he could not guarantee that he could fight against 5 sages at the same time. Thinking to this point, he suppressed the shock in his heart and asked, Who are the people on the ship? It seems to be a crazy Taoist, a man, and 3 women. Yu Jingzi's words caused his expression to change. Although I wasn't there at the time, I spread out my mental energy to investigate the scene. At this point, a trace of fear appeared on his face. At that time, the 5 martial saints joined forces to fight that Taoist. However, 3 of them died at his hands. As long as one stepped into the martial saint realm, one could be said to be completely above all living beings. Unless the heavens and earth underwent a great change, it would be very difficult for one to die. However, he would never forget the strange phenomenon of a saint falling in the northern sky that day. There was even a mist of blood in the void. That crazy Taoist crossed the void with one hand, and a strand of white hair cut off the entire ocean. This was also the reason why he had never dared to reveal it. Yichen said, "The other 2 escaped?" He thought he had overestimated the strength of the crazy Taoist. Unexpectedly, the real combat ability of the crazy Taoist was beyond his expectation again. Even with 5 martial sages working together, Xiao Chun still managed to kill 3 of them. Such a person was truly frightening. "No!" Yu Jingzi shook his head and said, "Even though 3 martial saints died, the Taoist was also severely injured. Because of this, he slapped the netherworld ship to the end of the vast sea and stayed behind to fight the remaining 2 martial saints." "What happened next?" Yi Chun asked impatiently. Yu Jingzi said slowly, "Later, the Taoist and the 2 martial saints disappeared, along with the underworld ship." "Where's the end of the immensity sea?" Yi Chun asked. Yu Jingzi couldn't help but look at him. "There are 2 places at the end of the immensity sea. One is the Tianfeng Sea area, and the other is the East Barren Territory." "Why do you say that?" Yichen was confused. Previously, Yun Yi had told him that the immensity sea was part of the Heavenly Wind Sea region. If that was the case, then the underworld ship must be heading towards the Heavenly Wind Sea region. "There's something fellow Taoist Yi doesn't know." Yu Jingzi shook his head and said, "The Tianfeng Sea area stretches across 5 great territories. Although the Hanhai is part of the Tianfeng Sea area, it is located between the northern region and the Eastern Barren Territory." Yichen secretly frowned upon hearing that. He had to make a choice. He could either go to the Eastern Barren Territory or the Tianfeng Sea area. Of course, there was a third choice, which was the Zhongzhou of the 5 great territories. After all, the 5 martial saints came from Zhongzhou, and their target was the underworld ship. It was very likely that Su Yuhan and the rest would appear in Zhongzhou. While he was deep in thought, Yu Jingzi was also quietly sizing him up. He could not help but ask, "Fellow, what's your relationship with the people on the underworld ship? Since you're not willing to get involved in their grudges, it's better for you to know less," Yi Chun said casually. Yu Jingzi's heart skipped a beat, and he said gratefully, "Thank you for the reminder, fellow." At his level, there were very few people in the entire ancient desolate realm who could compare to him. He could be said to be standing at the top of the world. However, he would also have many concerns. The biggest one was karma. As the saying went, karma was heartless. Once he was involved, he might die. Subsequently, Yi Chun chatted with him for a while before leaving with his daughter. After sensing that he had left the white Jade Jing, Yu Jingzi's expression kept changing. He did not say a word. At this moment, a middle-aged man silently appeared and hesitated to speak. "Ancestor, why did you tell this person about that matter? Do you want to ask why I'm being so polite?" Yu Jingzi smiled calmly. "Not bad." The middle-aged man braced himself and said, "Even if he's a martial sacred, he's not a match for the progenitor. Besides, the incident back then involved the Middle Continent. If they find out..." Yu Jingzi took a good look at the direction where Yi Chun had left and smiled calmly. "Although this man didn't reveal anything, I can still guess that he's related to the crazy priest on the spirit ship. Ancestor, all the more we can't let him go." The middle-aged man stomped his feet. "On the contrary, we should inform the Central Prefecture. Perhaps the White Jade Capital can use this opportunity to ascend to the Central Prefecture." "Fool!" Yu Jingzi scolded. "Who can guarantee that the crazy Taoist is dead or alive? Who could be sure that this kid was not a descendant of the crazy Taoist? If we take a wrong step, our White Jade Capital will be annihilated." His words immediately caused the middle-aged man's heart to skip a beat. That was right. That crazy Taoist did not die from the combined attacks of 5 martial sacred. He even killed 3 martial sacred in a row. What if he did not die and killed his way into the white jade capital? How could the progenitor defend against him alone? From now on, you are not allowed to provoke the major dynasties, and you are not allowed to interfere in the secular world. Yu Jingzi turned around and left after saying that. The middle-aged man also went to give the order. What they did not know was that not long after he left, the space where he was standing rippled slightly. Then, Yi Chen's figure appeared. Yi Chen's eyes flickered a few times as he said calmly, "This person is quite sensible. He saved me a lot of trouble." End of this chapter. Chapter 1104. The Grand Dynasty, Longjing City. Yun Yi stood on the city wall, her beautiful eyes fixed on the void, as if there was something there that she could not bear to look away from. 2 hours had passed. Many people had left. In the end, only a palace maid and many guards remained by her side. A palace maid came forward with a coat and said, "Empress Dowager, it's cold. Put on some clothes. The snow had melted." Following the death of the white jade capital, the heavy snow that enveloped the entire Grand Dynasty gradually disappeared. However, the melting snow became even colder. "You guys can leave. I want some peace and quiet." Yun Yi's expression did not change. The others did not dare to say anything and could only leave. They stood far away as if they were worried about her. "Mr. Yi, are you still alive?" Yun Yi stared blankly at the void, her hands clenched tightly, unconsciously. Until now, she still could not believe that Yi Chun dared to kill his way into the white jade capital. This idea was simply too crazy. Just a single envoy from the white jade capital was enough to render her sect powerless, let alone the entire white jade capital. At this moment, Yun Yi's beautiful eyes suddenly shook, and a hint of surprise appeared on her beautiful face. In her line of sight, a thin figure walked through the air and landed beside her. "Mr. Yi." Yun Yi could not help but be overjoyed. Yi Chen nodded slightly. Then, he looked at the snow that was gradually dispersing around him and said coldly, "I've already talked to the white jade capital's supreme elder. From now on, I won't cause trouble for your sect anymore." "What?" Yun Yi could not believe it. The white jade capital's supreme elder? Mr. Yi could actually talk to the white jade capital's supreme elder? Before she could react, Yi Chan said again, "I promised Qi Tiandao to protect your sect for 3 months. However, now that your sect crisis has been resolved, it's time for me to leave." Before this, the biggest crisis of the Grand Dynasty was the 8 kings who rebelled in the white jade capital. However, with the death of the acting king, the other 7 kings fought on their own. In addition, the white jade capital had compromised. Currently, the only enemy of the Grand Dynasty was the Qing dynasty. There would definitely be war between the 2 countries. However, Yi Chen did not plan to interfere. If the Grand Dynasty could not even deal with the empire, there was no need for it to exist. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Chen's expression changed. Yun Yi was startled at first, then her delicate body trembled slightly. Her face suddenly became somewhat pale. A few seconds later, she took a deep breath and bit her lip. "When we set off?" "Tomorrow morning." Yi Chen spoke slowly. He had yet to make a decision on whether to go to the eastern wilderness, the heavenly wind sea area, or the central plains. Yun Yi's expression was incomparably complicated. All right. At night, Yi Chen stayed in the residence that Yun Yi had arranged for him. He meditated secretly while the little girl was asleep. Not long after, the silence was broken. A weak knock came from outside. "Mr. Yi, it's me, Lu Fei." Yi Chen frowned and got up to walk out of the room. He then pushed the door of the residence open and saw the former standing outside with a carriage next to him. After learning of King Langya's death, Lu Fei had been living in pain for the past few days. She had only walked out of it today. Even so, there was still a hint of sorrow between her brows. "Mr. Yi, the Empress Dowager has invited you. She said that she has prepared a gift for you." "A gift?" Yi Chen was slightly stunned. He then turned around and entered the house to carry his daughter from the bed. The little girl, who was sleeping soundly, turned around and could not stop smacking her lips as if she was dreaming of delicious food. Deep in the palace, Yi-Chen rode a carriage all the way to the entrance of an extremely luxurious palace. No one dared to stop him. "Mr. Yi, we're here." Lu Fei came out to welcome her, bowed, and said, "Empress Dowager only summoned you. I will temporarily help you carry Meng Meng." At that moment, the little girl was woken up by the bumpy carriage. She hugged Yi-Chen's neck and said, "Daddy, where are we?" "Meng Meng, can I bring you to eat delicious food? There's something fun," Lu Fei said with incomparable love. Sure, sure." The little girl struggled to get out of Yi-Chen's embrace and ran into Lu Fei's embrace. "Mr. Yi, the Empress Dowager is waiting for you inside." Lu Fei smiled and left with the little girl before Yi-Chen could say anything. Along the way, the two of them giggled. Yi-Chen rubbed his nose and looked at the empty palace before him. Eventually, he stepped in. There was a red carpet in the palace with bead curtains hanging high. The red candles were dazzling, and there was sandalwood fragrance lingering in the air. It made everything look very charming. As soon as Yi-Chen entered, he lifted his eyes and looked around. However, he realized that there was nobody there. There was only the faint sound of water behind the screen far away. Through the candlelight, there was a naked silhouette who seemed to be bathing. Helplessness flashed through Yi-Chen's eyes. At this point, if he still did not realize what was going on, he would seem a little stupid. He turned around and was about to leave when he saw the door close slowly. Subsequently, an extremely gentle voice came from behind him. "Mr. Yi, please wait." The screen was slowly lifted up, and a large red bed was immediately exposed to the air. A fragile leg slowly extended out from the mosquito net, and then completely opened the mosquito net. Yi-Chen's expression was rather unnatural. What came into view was a graceful figure wrapped in a red girdle lying on the bed. With the help of the moonlight that shone in, the slender body was trembling slightly, and the side of her face, which had her head lowered, was blushing. Yi-Chen took a deep breath in and forced himself to get rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind. He said while forcing a smile, "Empress Dowager, I told you before." Phew, without waiting for him to finish speaking, the beautiful figure flashed and landed on the ground. A phoenix robe tightly wrapped around her body. The former turned around slightly and looked at Yi-Chen with her beautiful eyes. "There's no Empress Dowager here tonight. There's only a woman called Yun." As soon as she finished speaking, she grabbed at the banquet that had already been prepared, and a pair of cups fell into her hands. 2 cups of wine were filled. Yun covered her face with her sleeve and finished the wine in the cup in one gulp. She then looked at Yi-Chen. "Mr. Yi, would you like a drink with me?" Yi-Chen sighed softly. He could only grab the cup of wine and finish it in one gulp. However, he realized that as soon as the wine entered his stomach, he felt a faint burning sensation. His expression was a little unnatural. How could he not know what had been put in the wine? He then said coldly, "Miss Yun, please behave yourself." The former looked at him in a daze, and then a stream of tears slowly fell. "Can you stay? I'm willing to give you this world." Into this chapter. Chapter 1105. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. It was a quiet night. Inside the quiet palace, 2 shadows were elongated under the moonlight, and the air was accompanied by the sound of heavy breathing. "Can you stay? I'm willing to give you this world." At that moment, Yun looked at Yi-Chen in a daze. There were tears in her clear eyes. Perhaps it was because she had drunk a glass of wine, but her enchanting face was half flushed. She felt a little hot. She could not suppress the urge in her heart. She was even more aware that if the words she'd spoken earlier were spread, it would definitely cause the entire world to be shaken. No matter what, she was still the Empress Dowager of the current dynasty. She was the late Emperor's woman in name, even though she had never been taken advantage of. However, she could not care less, because she knew that the man in front of her would leave after daybreak, and this farewell was likely to be permanent. If she did not seize the opportunity to say it now, she might not have the chance to say it in this lifetime. Despite Yi-Chen's determination, his heart could not help but waver when he heard such direct words. Furthermore, The wine he had drunk earlier had some condiments added to it, causing him to be unable to react in time. Phew! Immediately after, an intoxicating scent of a young lady filled his nose, causing him to be instantly jolted awake. Yi-chun waved his sleeve and pushed the beauty who was approaching him a few steps back. He then said, "Ms. Yun, I think you're drunk." Drunk? After Yun stabilized herself, she laughed self-deprecatingly. "Perhaps, but only when I'm drunk will I have the courage to tell you the truth. I'm the daughter of the Han Hai King. I thought I was in control of my marriage." She looked at Yi-chun quietly and bit her red lips. She took a deep breath in and said, "However, I was played by fate. I was sent to the Yeo court and was taken as a concubine by the dying late emperor. Later on, I became the Empress Dowager at the age of 20. Yi-chun said nothing, but he secretly sighed. If Yun-yi was on Earth at her age, she might still be in university. She was a girl without any social experience. However, in the ancient desolate realm, what she had experienced and borne far exceeded women of her age. I thought that I would protect the sect for the rest of my life until I died of old age because of the late emperor's wishes." Yun-yi's eyes were red. She looked at Yi-chun with tears in her eyes. "But God let me meet you. The first time I saw you, your long white hair made me feel that you have experiences beyond your youthful appearance. As for your gaze, it's deep and mysterious. I didn't even dare to take a second look at it before." Her nose twitched slightly as she spoke to this point. She looked at Yi-chun with her beautiful eyes shining. "I really hope that you can leave everything behind and stay." Yi-chun saw the gentleness and tenderness that only a young lady had when he met her gaze. It gave one the urge to protect her uncontrollably. He shook his head slightly and said, "I'm sorry. I've said it from the beginning. A sect isn't where I belong. I have a wife, parents, and friends." As soon as these words came out, Yun-yi felt a stabbing pain in her heart for no reason. Her slightly expectant eyes dimmed. Even though she had vaguely guessed Yi-chun's determination, it was still difficult for her to accept and give up after hearing it. Thinking to this point, she wiped her tears and forcefully suppressed the sadness in her heart. Then, "Can you bring me along?" "No," Yi-chun said almost ruthlessly. It was undeniable that the weakness that came from Yun-yi's bones made him have the urge to protect her. However, his rationality told him that he and Yun-yi were people from two different worlds. The palace fell into a short silence. Yi-chun said after a long time, "It's late. Rest early." After saying that, he slowly disappeared from the palace without waiting for the former to speak, leaving the beautiful woman standing in the same place alone with a sad expression. Yi-chun found Meng Meng, who was being fed all sorts of delicacies by Lu Fei in the pantry. The little girl's stomach was round. "All right, go back with Daddy. We're leaving tomorrow." Yi-chun picked her up, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. The little girl burped and wiped the remaining pastry crumbs at the corner of her mouth on Yi-chun. She waved at Lu Fei. "Goodbye, Sister Lu Fei. Goodbye, Meng Meng." Lu Fei snickered immediately. After watching the father and daughter leave, she looked in the direction of Changle Palace and sighed softly. Clearly, even she could feel that the relationship between Mr. Yi and Empress Dowager Yun-yi was not ordinary. The next morning, Yi-chun picked up the little girl who had washed up and rushed to the wormhole that he had found earlier. When he passed by a relay station on the way, a group of cavalry came over. The leader was Lu Fei. "Mr. Yi, the Empress Dowager asked me to give you something." Yi-chun took it and took a look. He realized that it was a storage bag with close to 10,000 spirit stones in it. There was also an exquisite perfume pouch that a woman used with the word "E" carved on it. "She's thoughtful." Yi-chun sighed softly. He could not help but recall what happened last night. Lu Fei said hesitantly, "The Empress Dowager also said that she hopes that you can still remember her face after a few years." "All right." Yi-chun nodded lightly and continued walking towards the main road while carrying the little girl. Lu Fei watched the father and daughter disappear completely before returning to the imperial city with the cavalry. At the peak of the imperial city, a cold woman stood alone. She looked into the sky, and a complicated expression appeared in her beautiful eyes. Lu Fei appeared quietly. "Empress Dowager, he's gone." In this world, there will be separation when things come together. If there's love, why should I be afraid of separation? 10 years of life and death are boundless. If I don't think about it, it'll be unforgettable. Yini mumbled to herself. The scenes of her meeting Yi Chun kept appearing in her mind. All of this seemed like a dream. As the saying went, time passed quickly and things changed. This was how the world should be. Lu Fei said nothing. After an unknown period of time, a faint voice rang in her ears. The wind is blowing. Let's go back. On the 5th day after Yi Chun left, the internal rebellion in the imperial city was completely quelled. A month later, Yin Yi personally led the army and fought the 800,000 troops of the Qin kingdom at the border with less than 500,000 troops. The Qin kingdom was defeated, and military advisor Gu Jinxiu's injuries flared up, and he died on the battlefield. The Qin kingdom had no choice but to retreat 3,000 li and make an agreement with the major sects never to offend each other. At that time, Yin Yi's prestige in the major sects was at its peak, and she won the hearts of the people. The hidden dangers in the court broke out, and many ministers, under the guise of protecting the emperor, tried to force the Empress Dowager to return her power. Internal strife broke out in the palace, which was then suppressed by Yun Yi. Countless heads rolled to the ground, and the little emperor Liu Changqian suddenly died. Yun Yi proclaimed herself the empress and took control of the Daizong dynasty as the empress. She ruled over the world and changed the dynasty, changing the name of the Daizong dynasty into the Great Qin dynasty. Since then, all the new palace maids and eunuchs had a question in their hearts, and that was the statue erected in the middle of the palace. The statue seemed to be of a man with a head of white hair. His eyes were deep and his expression was cold, as if he wanted to look down on the gods of the world. Whenever the Empress Dowager had time, she would stand alone in front of the statue for a long time, until late at night. Many people were discussing this in private. Some said that the man in the statue was the Empress's elder brother, while others said that the man in the statue was the Empress's first love. If you like Evildoer Daddy in the city, please collect Evildoer Daddy in the city. Chapter 1106. Ancient Desolate Realm, Tianfeng Sea Area. On a remote island, the waves were crashing crazily against the reefs on the shore, and groups of seagulls were soaring high in the sky. However, this natural scenery was broken at this moment. The entire island trembled slightly, and a resplendent yellow light suddenly appeared in the southeast corner of the island. As the yellow light dissipated, a thin figure carrying a little girl appeared out of thin air under a huge reef. Have we arrived? After Yi Chun stabilized himself, he lifted his eyes and looked around while carrying Ming Ming. He realized that he was on a huge island. As far as the eye could see, there was a boundless sea in the distance, and it was filled with endless blue water. The little girl in his arms blinked her black eyes and said, "Daddy, where are we?" "This." Daddy wants to know too. Yi Chun looked awkward immediately. At the same time, he felt a little regretful. He should have asked for a complete map of the Tianfeng Sea area from the White Jade capital before he passed through the wormhole. However, looking at the endless sea before him, he could still guess that he had indeed arrived at the Tianfeng Sea area. After some thought, he finally chose the Tianfeng Sea area between the Eastern Wilderness, Tianfeng Sea area, and Zhongzhou. Right at that moment, a large net suddenly descended from the sky, trapping the father and daughter within it. Squeak! The little girl was shocked. At the same time, an extremely excited voice came from afar. "Master, I caught him. I caught him." In the blink of an eye, more than 10 figures rushed over. The leader was a middle-aged man with a one-eyed dragon in a cotton jacket and an eye patch over his left eye. The people behind him were holding steel forks or machetes. All of them looked unruly. Pirates? Yi Chun was slightly stunned. The dozen or so people surrounded Yi Chun and his daughter. The one-eyed dragon who was the leader said in surprise, "Didn't they say that the other party was an old man? Why is a brat?" "Master, I really don't know about that." A young man who was as skinny as a monkey behind him scratched his head with a confused expression. Could it be that the information was wrong? Ramai *SS. Someone kicked him and looked at Yi Chun in an unfriendly manner. I think this brat must be here to take advantage of us. Boss, why don't we? At this point, his eyes flashed with killing intent. Yi Chun's eyes turned grim. Just when he was going to attack, the one-eyed man suddenly raised his hand. Wait, the latter stared at Yi Chun fixedly. Little brother, may I ask who you are? Where are you from? As he spoke, he carefully sensed the aura on Yi Chun's body, but he realized that he could not sense anything at all. Yi Chun's body shook, and the big net that was wrapped around him was torn into pieces. The scene shocked the rest. Everyone gripped the weapons in their hands tightly and looked at Yi Chun with a murderous intent. The youth, who was as skinny as a monkey, shouted, Master, this kid is a martial cultivator. Yi Chun looked around and looked at the one-eyed man. What is this place? Oh my, someone immediately sneered and said to the one-eyed man, Master, this brat actually turned around and asked us. As soon as he said that, the rest laughed out loud. A hunk walked out while sneering. Brat, I don't care who you are today, but I can only say that you're unlucky to have fallen into our Black Shark Gang's hands. As soon as he said that, he swung the machete in his hand at Yi Chun. His master stage cultivation base exploded. You're courting death. A cold gleam flashed through Yi Chun's eyes. The man exploded into a bloody mist instantly. Dead silence filled the place. The pirates, including the one-eyed man, were dumbstruck. They stared at Yi Chun with fear in their eyes. Voila! A few seconds later, the dozen of them threw away the weapons in their hands and knelt before Yi Chun. Master, spare my life. Senior, it's a misunderstanding. It's a misunderstanding. Yi Chun watched everything coldly. He then stretched his neck and said to the one-eyed man, Can we talk properly now? I didn't know that you'd come to Black Shark Island. Please forgive me. The one-eyed man tried his best to remain calm, but the sweat on his forehead betrayed him. Killing a master and being invisible. The other party must be a martial venerable. Answer 3 questions for me. Yi Chun said slowly. Firstly, who are you guys? Secondly, where is this place? Thirdly, why are you trapping me? The one-eyed man said without hesitation, I am mortal, with a Golden Shark Gang sea pirates who live on Golden Shark Island. This is Golden Shark Island, he stammered. 3 days ago, we heard that a great enemy was coming to destroy Golden Shark Island, so we set up a trap here in advance. I didn't expect that we've misunderstood you, immortal. Golden Shark Gang? Golden Shark Island? Yi Chun secretly frowned. He was speechless. It turned out that he had taken the blame for someone else. The trap that the pirates set up was set up in a wonderful way. It happened to be set up at the exit of the teleportation. Just as he was about to speak, an anxious voice suddenly came from afar. Father, on the surface of the sea, thousands of feet away, there was a ship speeding towards them. Not long after, a woman in black with a ponytail rushed over with a young man. The moment they saw the young man, the dozen or so pirates kneeling on the ground, including the one-eyed man, were overjoyed. It was as if they had seen their savior. When the woman in black approached, she subconsciously wanted to help the one-eyed man up, but she realized that it was extremely difficult. She could not help but turn around and glare at Yi Chun. Who are you? Why did you make my father kneel on the ground? Sister, you're finally here. This brat made us kneel on the ground because of a disagreement. A pirate kneeling on the ground begged for help. Boom! At that moment, the woman attacked Yi Chun brazenly. The metal attribute energy was extremely violent. Clearly, she had reached the cultivation base of a martial venerable. Get lost! Yi Chun slapped her. The woman grunted and was sent flying directly. Her face was filled with shock. She did not expect Yi Chun to send her martial venerable cultivation base flying with a single slap. The young man's expression changed at first. Then, he looked at Yi Chun in an unfriendly manner. Brother, aren't you being too ruthless? At that moment, a pirate took the opportunity to leap up and sprinkle a handful of poisonous powder at him. However, a fireball suddenly shot out from Yi Chun's hand and burned the man into a flaming man. Eventually, only ashes were left on the ground. The young man's expression changed drastically when he saw that. Fire manipulation. Mystic Master. The other party must be a grade 5 Mystic Master. As he thought to this point, he immediately clasped his fists at Yi Chun and said respectfully, Junior Jiang Chung greets Mystic Master. If you like Evil Dad in the City, please collect Evil Dad in the City. Chapter 1107. As soon as Jiang Chung finished speaking, the woman in black and the rest were completely stunned. Mystic Master. These 2 words were like a bolt out of the blue, exploding in everyone's mind with a loud bang. They knew very well what Mystic Masters represented in the ancient desolate realm. Not to mention their spells, the Mystic Master union behind them was the most terrifying existence in the ancient desolate realm. Jiang Cheng's master, Old Man Golden Shark, was also a Mystic Master. Moreover, he was a grade 6 Mystic Master. That was why he dominated the area within 3,000 kilometers of Golden Shark Island. And they had actually offended a Mystic Master? The one-eyed man, who was kneeling on the ground, shuddered as he thought to this point. Subsequently, he kowtowed to Yi Chun repeatedly. Immortal, my daughter is ignorant. Please forgive her. The rest of them kowtowed repeatedly. There was no longer any disrespect on their faces. There was only fear and trembling on their faces. Yi Chun had the intention to kill initially. However, the sudden change in everyone's attitude made him gradually disperse his killing intent. Jiang Chung heaved a sigh of relief before saying respectfully, May I know your name, Senior? Why are you here? Yi Chun said calmly, I'm Mad Southern Yi. I accidentally stumbled upon this place. I'm looking for a map. As soon as these words came out, the crowd did not seem to believe it. On the other hand, the one-eyed man took the initiative to say, Immortal, my name is Wang Hai. This is my daughter, Wang Mei. May I know what kind of map you need? Yi Chun said without hesitation, a map that shows the location of this place and other places. The more detailed, the better. I wonder if this will do. Wang Hai took out a sheepskin scroll immediately and handed it to Yi Chun. Yi Chun took it and frowned slightly. The map covered dozens of islands of various sizes nearby. At the end of the day, it only covered the sea. As if sensing his dissatisfaction, Jiang Chung thought about it and suddenly said, Senior, do you want a map that includes the land? Yes. Yi Chun looked at him in anticipation. Jiang Chung seemed to be hesitating. He gritted his teeth and said, I don't have the map you want, but my master does. Your master? Yi Chun said. That's right. Jiang Chung smiled proudly. My master, Elder Golden Shark, is known as the #1 person in the Golden Shark 13 archipelago. He is also a Mystic Master. Can you introduce me to your master? Yi Chun looked at him with a burning gaze. Unexpectedly, Jiang Chung showed a troubled expression and said, Senior, you may not know this, but the Southern Islands are in danger. My master is discussing with other seniors about the enemy. I'm afraid he doesn't have time to see you now. Don't worry about it. You just need to bring me there. Yi Chun shook his head while smiling. Only then did Jiang Chung reluctantly nod his head. Afterwards, he had Wang Hai and the others clean up before returning to the ship and heading towards the northern seas. Along the way, Yi Chun learned that he was in the real sea of the Tianfeng Sea area. There were countless islands of various sizes in the Tianfeng Sea area. These islands were rich in resources and had been inhabited by people for generations. As the saying goes, where there are people, there will be Jianghu, and there will also be alliances for benefits. The Golden Shark Island that Wang Hai and the rest were on was one of the 13 archipelago. Jiang Cheng's master, Elder Golden Shark, was the nominal owner of the 13 archipelago. There were many forces like the 13 archipelago. They formed an alliance because they were bordering each other, and they were called the Southern Island Alliance. 3 days ago, a challenge was shot into the Southern Islands Alliance's sea area. It said that someone would come to occupy the Southern Islands in 3 days. This naturally angered everyone in the Southern Islands. Therefore, in the past 3 days, the Southern Islands that covered tens of thousands of kilometers have been strictly guarded, and the island masters had gathered to discuss strategies to deal with the enemy. During this period, Yi Chun had probed Jiang Chung and the rest to see if they had seen another Netherworld ship. However, to his disappointment, be it Jiang Chung, Wang Hai, or the rest, they were all at a loss. Thinking to this point, he could only ask something else. Have you heard of Tianfeng City? The reason why he asked that was because the King Mu fort was in Tianfeng City. Tianfeng City? Jiang Cheng looked at Yi Chen in surprise when he heard that. Senior, have you been to Tianfeng City? Even the others had looks of envy on their faces. Yi Chen said, I've heard of it, but I've never been there. Jiang Cheng did not doubt it. Instead, he said with a smile, Senior, you might not know this, but it's not easy to enter Tianfeng City now. Why? Yi Chen was surprised. Wang Hai interrupted, Immortal, I wonder if you've heard of the King Mu fort? I've never heard of it. Yi Chen's heart skipped a beat. Wang Hai looked at him in surprise and continued, The King Mu fort is now one of the 5 overlords of the Tianfeng Sea area. It's said that there's a martial ancestor powerhouse guarding it, and this martial ancestor powerhouse is the young mistress of the King Mu fort, Mu Kai Wei. Apart from Jiang Cheng, the rest of the people were shocked by his words. A martial ancestor powerhouse. In their eyes, he was no different from an immortal. He could easily cause landslides and the earth to crack. What they did not notice was a gleam flashing through Yi Chen's eyes. You're a martial ancestor so soon? A martial ancestor was equivalent to a supreme giant on earth, and it was also equivalent to a beginner-stage golden core cultivator. Before he left the Tianfeng Sea area, he had given Jiao a cultivation method and some medicinal pills. In that case, Mu Kaiwei had also cultivated that cultivation method. However, he still did not expect that Mu Kaiwei would reach golden core in just over a year. Her aptitude could be said to be monstrous. Wang Hai continued, The King Mu fort is the true owner of Tianfeng City. It's said that the King Mu fort is a subject of the Great Li dynasty, the overlord of the Tianfeng Sea area. However, the two seem to have fallen out. The Great Li dynasty sent troops to attack the King Mu fort, but they were defeated. Therefore, the King Mu fort and the Great Li dynasty maintained a relatively delicate situation. Yi Chen's eyes gleamed when he heard that. He was extremely relieved. In other words, the King Mu fort has grown to a point where even a dynasty has to fear it. That's right, Wang Hai nodded. Jiang Cheng continued. However, I heard from my master that the King Mu fort hasn't been having a good time recently. Why? Yi Chen looked at him fixedly. Jiang Cheng said with uncertainty, There are 5 overlords in the Tianfeng Sea area, and the King Mu fort is one of them. It's said that the sect competition is about to be held, and many forces are eyeing the King Mu fort. There are many forces arranged by the Great Li dynasty. Senior brother, didn't you say that the young mistress of the King Mu fort, Mu Kai Wei, is a martial ancestor powerhouse? Wang Mei, who had been silent all this while, could not help but say, She's already a martial ancestor. There are very few existences that can threaten her, right? Her life goal was to become a martial ancestor powerhouse, but she was only a martial venerable now. Actually, that's not the case. Jiang Cheng also revealed a yearning expression. There's no lack of martial king powerhouses among the other 4 overlords. Let me ask you, under the pressure of the 4 overlords, how can the King Mu fort sit back and relax? He did not notice that there was a cold gleam surging out from under Yi Chen's faint smile. The flawless chapter of The Monstrous Nanny in the City will continue to be updated on the mobile game bar. There are no advertisements on the website, so please bookmark and recommend the mobile game bar. If you like Evil Dad in the City, please collect Evil Dad in the City. Chapter 1108. The sea breeze whistled as the boat sailed against the current. Yi Chen stood on the ship and looked at the endless horizon. He breathed in the salty sea breeze, but he was not calm. When he returned to the Tianfeng Sea area this time, he originally wanted to borrow the power of the King Mu fort to search for the ghost ship and the whereabouts of Su Yuhan and the others. However, he did not expect that through the narration of Jiang Cheng, Wang Hai, and the others, he would find out that the King Mu fort was facing a crisis. His eyes flickered nonstop as he gradually made up his mind. No matter what, the King Mu fort had some connections with him, so he would definitely not sit back and do nothing. Especially since Jiao and Mu Kaiwei had cultivated the cultivation technique that he had imparted to them and were considered half his disciples. As he thought of this, A resolute and cold figure appeared in his mind, and his heart warmed slightly. Meanwhile, the woman in black, Wang Mei, sighed heavily. No matter what, a legendary figure like young Miss Mu isn't someone we can look at directly. I wonder what kind of person would be worthy of her. If it was said that Mu Kaiwei was hailed as the #1 beauty in the Tianfeng Sea region a year ago, then in this 1 year, this vase in the eyes of others had used her monstrous talent to prove herself. Thus, in the entire Tianfeng Sea region, countless young elites were infatuated with Mu Kaiwei. Wang Mei, who was also a woman, had also set her goal of surpassing Mu Kaiwei. Jiang Cheng seemed to have thought of something and said, I once heard from Master that Miss Mu is already married. Senior brother, that's impossible, right? Wang Mei was taken aback and was filled with disbelief. I don't know the specifics. Jiang Cheng shook his head slightly. It said that a year ago, the King Mu Fort held a wedding and recruited a son-in-law. His name is Shi Qianhan. In the beginning, everyone thought that he was a piece of trash who could not cultivate. What happened next? Wang Mei stomped her feet anxiously when she saw that Zhang Xian was halfway through his sentence. Senior Marshal brother, hurry up and say it. I'm dying of anxiety. This time, even Wang Hai and the other pirates couldn't help but look at Jiang Cheng. They had lived in the sea for a long time and had never set foot on land, so it was the first time they had heard of such an interesting story. At that time, no one understood why the King Mu Fort would recruit a piece of trash as their son-in-law. They also didn't understand why the beautiful first young Mistress Mu would marry a piece of trash. Jiang Cheng paused for a moment and said, later on, the King Mu Fort fell into danger and was suppressed by the Bloodblade sect, the Seven Mysteries Mansion, the Vile Valley, and the Tianfeng City Governor's Mansion. The King Mu Fort suffered heavy casualties, and at the critical moment, this useless son-in-law made a move. His expression turned grave as he slowly said, this person killed the experts of the 4 great forces by himself. He even killed his way into the Seven Mysteries Mansion and destroyed the entire Seven Mysteries Mansion. After that, he triggered the Emperor Conferment Tribulation and became a martial monarch in one go. As his voice fell, Wang Hai and the others sucked in a breath of cold air. Young Lady Mu's husband was actually a martial emperor? TSK, what's so great about it? However, Wang Mei said disdainfully, Senior brother, you just said that young Mistress Mu is a martial ancestor. What does a mere martial emperor count for in young Mistress Mu's eyes? Therefore, I feel that your rumor is false. The martial emperor was in front, and the martial grandmaster was behind. In comparison, the rumors about Shi Qianhan were nothing to her. That's what I heard too. Jiang Cheng smiled bitterly. Junior sister is right because the mysterious son-in-law of the King Mu Fort disappeared a year ago and has never appeared. It must be fake. Wang Mei said without hesitation. I admit that Shi Qianhan is stronger than me as a martial emperor. However, he's still not worthy of young Mistress Mu. The rest nodded one after another. Yichen shook his head lightly when he heard that. He did not know whether to laugh or cry. Wang Mei saw him shaking his head. She could not help but say, Senior, do you think what I said doesn't make sense? Although the misunderstanding had been resolved when Yi Chun sent her flying with a slap earlier, she still took it to heart. Therefore, she could not help but ask. You're right. Yi Chun was stunned at first. Then, he nodded slowly and said, This Shi Qianhan is indeed not worthy of that young mistress of the King Mu Fort. Only then did Wang Mei reveal a satisfied smile. At that moment, Wang Hai ordered his men to lower the sail and said respectfully, Immortal, we're about to reach the shore. Yi Chun lifted his head and looked over. He realized that the surface of the sea before him had become lively. Huge ships whistled over from all directions. In the end, they ran towards a huge island in the distance. As for the island in the distance, rather than calling it an island, it was better to call it a land with endless mountains. There were many huge sharks swimming around it, but they got along well with the crowd. Jiang Cheng took the initiative to introduce, Senior, this is the real Golden Shark Island. These sharks were subdued by my master, which is why they're so respectful. At this point, his eyes were filled with pride. My master, the Golden Shark Elder, is a grade 5 mystic master. He tamed a shark king. Hearing the name Golden Shark Elder, the dozen or so pirates, including Wang Hai, could not help but have a hint of respect flash across their faces. Let's go. Jiang Cheng ordered his men to dock the ship. Countless gazes looked over. Most of them were looking at Yi Chun. Clearly, they sensed that Yi Chun was a stranger. At that moment, a strange voice came from afar. Yo, isn't that 5th junior brother and 6th junior sister? What? Did you guys gain nothing from this trip? Jiang Cheng and Wang Mei's expressions immediately sank. They saw a few figures striding over from the crowd 300 meters away. They were all young men and women who were dressed extravagantly. The auras within these people were not weak. The strongest one was a grade 3 mystic master, which was equivalent to a martial venerable. The leader was a young man with a slightly sinister face. His eyes were filled with disdain as he looked at Jiang Cheng and the rest. Jiang Cheng said indifferently, "Second senior brother." Before the sinister young man could speak, a freckled woman behind him said coldly, "Our 5th junior brother is becoming more and more arrogant. He only has 2nd senior brother in his eyes, but he doesn't care about me, his 3rd senior sister. That's right. 5th junior brother has only been in the sect for a few years, but he's already looking down on us. As time passes, won't he even look down on 2nd senior brother and eldest senior sister? 5th junior brother is not bad." The rest spoke one after another. However, all of them were mocking Jiang Cheng. Yi Chun saw Jiang Cheng's expression stiffen. Subsequently, he smiled. "Senior brothers and sisters, you must be joking. How would I dare to look down on you guys? 5th junior brother, who is this?" At that moment, the sinister man in the lead suddenly looked at Yi Chun with some hostility. "Master once said that outsiders are not allowed to be brought to the island. Are you trying to break the rules?" As soon as he said that, the rest looked at Yi Chun with hostility. The rest of them looked at Yi Chun with hostility. The celestial chi in their bodies surged secretly. End of this chapter. Chapter 1109. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little off, Wang Hai subconsciously said, "Immortal Chiu, this immortal Yi is..." Before he could finish speaking, he was sent flying. The sinister-looking young man said, "Who do you think you are? Do you have the right to speak here?" "You." Wang Mei stepped forward and glared at Wang Hai and his wife furiously. "Enough." Jiang Cheng interrupted everyone and said coldly, "Second senior brother, I got to know this senior Yi outside. Thinking that the Southern Islands are facing a crisis now, I want to introduce him to Master." The sinister-looking man and the rest were stunned at first, then they laughed out loud. "Senior Yi?" The freckled woman looked like she had heard a funny joke. She pointed at Yi Chun and said while sneering, "5th junior brother, did I hear you correctly? You actually said that this brat, who hasn't even grown his hair, is a senior? Ha ha ha, this brat doesn't have any aura on him at all, and his physique is so weak. He's actually a senior? 5th junior brother is getting more and more muddle-headed. He's actually being fooled so easily." The rest of the people burst into laughter. 5th junior brother. The sinister-looking man took 2 steps forward and patted Jiang Cheng's shoulder lightly. He sighed softly and said, "I know you're eager to make contributions and want to please Master, but you should at least have some brains." Jiang Cheng's face was flushed red. The sinister-looking man said again, "All right, I won't disturb your intimate time with this senior." With that, he left with the people behind him. Jiang Cheng could hear their mocking laughter from afar. As soon as they left, Wang Mei could not help but question Yi Chun. "Senior, why didn't you help senior brother earlier? Why should I help him out?" Yi Chun said with a faint smile while carrying his daughter. Wang Mei was furious. Senior brother was mocked by 2nd senior brother and the rest because of you. "All right, junior sister." Jiang Cheng interrupted her and bowed to Yi Chun. "Thank you for not attacking earlier, senior. Otherwise, my life would be even more difficult in the future." He knew very well that his senior brothers and sisters had been targeting him and treating him as a thorn in their side. If Yi Chun had attacked earlier, he would have intimidated them on the surface. However, Yi Chun could not stay on Golden Shark Island forever. There would be a day when he would leave. Once Yi Chun left, her situation would become even more difficult. Senior brother, you're too weak. Wang Mei was somewhat disappointed. On the other hand, Yi Chen secretly nodded. Jiang Cheng was young, but he knew how to endure. This kind of person was usually the most promising. On the contrary, his senior brothers and sisters would one day suffer the consequences of their own actions. Senior, this junior will bring you to see my master now. Jiang Cheng led Yi Chen onto the island respectfully and walked toward the largest pavilion on the island. Yi Chen looked around as he walked. He realized that although this was a place where pirates lived, it was well managed. What surprised him the most was the faint aura of 3 martial monarchs on the island. It seemed that one of them was Jiang Cheng's master, Old Man Golden Shark. 15 minutes later, Jiang Cheng stopped in front of a huge pavilion. This was the palace where Old Man Golden Shark lived. It was known as Golden Shark Palace. Jiang Cheng stepped forward and said to the old man guarding the door, "Uncle Gong, please inform master for me." The old man called Uncle Gong took a few glances at them. His gaze lingered on Yi Chen for a few seconds before he walked in expressionlessly. Inside Golden Shark Palace, 3 old figures sat on the ground with 3 cups of fragrant tea in front of them. However, even when the tea was completely warm, no one took a sip. The 3 of them were an old man in a golden robe, an old man with a face as red as wax, and an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion. If there were outsiders present, they would be shocked to discover that these 3 were the 3 most powerful people in the entire Southern Islands. Old Man Golden Shark, Old Man Huagong, and Old Man with Spirit. The red-faced Old Man Huagong frowned deeply. "Brother Golden Shark, may I ask when your eldest disciple will return?" With Xia Er's cultivation base as a grade 4 Mystic Master, it'll take her at least 5 days to get back. Old Man Golden Shark had a worried expression as he sighed softly. However, the Crimson Afterglow sect that Xia is from is a subsidiary force of the King Muford after all. If she's escorted by the sect's elders, she'll be able to arrive in 2 days. 2 days? The ruddy old man with Spirit smiled bitterly. That mysterious force only gave me 3 days to wait. 1 day has passed today. I'm afraid your eldest disciple won't be able to return in time. At this point, he shook his head slightly and said, "Moreover, I heard that the King Mu Fort is participating in the high sect competition. There's a lot of external pressure. As a subsidiary force, the Crimson Afterglow sect will definitely send out all their powerhouses. Now, we can only leave it to fate." Old Man Golden Shark sighed faintly. Then, he looked at Old Man Huagong and said, "Brother Huagong, are the northern and eastern islands unwilling to help us?" "Don't mention it. I've lost all my face, but they're still indifferent. They're even happy to see it happen." Old Man Huagong's expression was extremely grim. These old sly fools. In the past, when they saw that the Southern Islands Alliance was a force of the King Mu Fort, they were all enthusiastic. Now that the King Mu Fort is in danger, they're watching coldly from the sidelines. That's how people are. Old Man with Spirit did not mind at all. Then he said to Old Man Golden Shark, "Brother Golden Shark, have you really fought with that mysterious force?" "That's right," Old Man Golden Shark said with a solemn expression. "That night, I was in closed-door cultivation when I felt a very powerful aura charging over. I chased after it and fought it. After 5 rounds, I was injured by it with a single palm strike." There was a hint of fear in his eyes. "If it wasn't for my beast pet, the Golden Shark King, who saved me, I'm afraid I would have died by now. This person must be a martial ancestor realm powerhouse." Old Man Huagong and Old Man with Spirit looked at each other and said in unison, "Even if he's not far from the martial ancestor realm. In that case, doesn't that mean that even if the powerhouses from the Crimson Afterglow sect come, it'll be useless?" Old Man Golden Shark's heart sank completely. At this moment, a respectful voice sounded from outside. "Master, Jiang Cheng is back, and he brought an outsider to see you." "An outsider?" Old Man Golden Shark's expression darkened slightly, and he said with some displeasure, "Didn't I set a rule that outsiders are not allowed on the island?" On the sea, territorial awareness was even stronger than on land. The entire Southern Islands was extremely exclusive, and no one had ever dared to violate the rule. I'm not sure, Uncle Gong said again, but I heard Jiang Chung address that young man as senior, and his tone was extremely respectful. Senior? Young man? Old Man Golden Shark and the other two looked at each other, and there was a hint of displeasure between their brows. End of this chapter. Chapter 11:10. In Golden Shark Palace's lounge, dressed in a long golden robe, Elder Golden Shark sat on a high platform. He looked dignified without being angry, and his eyes were burning. Meanwhile, Old Man Mu Ling and Old Man Huogong were sitting below. Both of them were staring at Yichun. Jiang Chung respectfully knelt in front of the three. Disciple greets Master, Senior with Spirit, and Senior Huogong. Get up. Old Man Golden Shark raised his hand slightly before looking at Yichun behind him. His gaze was rather sharp. Who's this? Master, I met Senior Yi on the way back. Jiang Chung told the story in full detail. As soon as he finished speaking, the three of them, including Old Man Golden Shark, looked at Yichun, scrutinizing him. There was finally a slight change in the trio's gaze when they heard that Yichun had killed a master with a single glance and sent Wang Mei, a martial venerable, flying with a single slap. With such a technique, his strength would definitely not be lower than the pseudo-emperor stage. However, what puzzled them was that there was no cultivation fluctuation on Yichun at all. With that thought in mind, Elder Golden Shark took the initiative to speak. Fellow Taoist Yi, may I know where you're from? I'm from the north. Yichun said coldly. I passed by this place by accident. Since I don't know the geographical location, I'd like to ask for a map from you. As soon as he finished speaking, Old Fire Master immediately sneered. You came from the northern region? Jiang Chung was shocked at first, but then a bitter smile appeared on his face. Not bad. Yichun nodded lightly. Nonsense. Old Man Mu Ling snorted coldly. Do you know how far the northern region is from my Heavenwind region? It's hundreds of thousands of miles away, and there are countless spatial rifts. How did you get here? That's right. The northern region is extremely far from the Tianfengxi area. Even if a martial arts grandmaster wanted to cross the northern region, it would be impossible, not to mention the spatial crack. Old Man Golden Shark nodded too. There was a hint of hostility in his eyes when he looked at Yichun. May I ask how you got here? Of course. I came through the wormhole. Yichun said without thinking. Ridiculous. Without waiting for him to finish, Old Firesmith immediately interrupted. Wormhole? Do you know what wormhole is? In the entire Tianfengxi area, only the Great Li Dynasty has it. Even the 5 overlords like the King Mu Fort don't have it. Speaking of this, his eyes were extremely sharp. The wormhole of the Dali dynasty can only be used by the royal family. Moreover, we have lived in the Southern Islands for hundreds of years. Why haven't we found the exit of the teleportation matrix? In my opinion, you must be a spy sent by an outsider to find out the real situation of the Southern Islands. As soon as he said that, 3 waves of killing intent exploded in the hall. The 3 waves of killing intent were extremely sharp, and they locked onto Yichun. Yichun frowned slightly. The 3 people in front of him were only at the martial monarch realm. He had intended to ask them to lend him the map, but he did not expect them to be so untactful. Master, please calm down. Seniors, please calm down. Right at this moment, Jiang Chung suddenly knelt down heavily. Disciple is willing to use my life to guarantee that Senior Yi is definitely not a spy. As he spoke, he pressed his head against the ground and kowtowed heavily. Not long after, his forehead was already red. You guarantee it with your life? Old Man Golden Shark smirked coldly. What is your life compared to the millions of people in the Southern Islands? What if you alone bring disaster to the Southern Islands? Jiang Chung did not say a word and kowtowed heavily. Not long after, the entire ground was dyed red with blood. At this moment, Uncle Gong walked in and said, Master, there's a conflict between the Northern Islands and us. A group of juniors are fighting. Old Man Golden Shark's expression changed slightly. He looked at Jiang Chung, who was kneeling on the ground, and then at Yichun. Then he said, Be Astra-starred. Get out of here with your men. Jiang Chung stood up. Ignoring the blood on his head, he led Yichun out of the hall. After they left, Old Man Mu Ling could not help but say, "Fellow Golden Shark, this person's background is unknown. Why didn't you attack just now?" "It's precisely because this person's background is unknown that I didn't attack." Old Man Golden Shark shook his head slightly and said, "This is a sensitive period. Without knowing the other party's background, it's better to stay put. As long as we monitor him, we will definitely discover any intentions of this person. Fellow Golden Shark is indeed wise." Old Man Huagong revealed a look of realization and was filled with admiration. That afternoon, Yi Chan was arranged by Jiang Cheng to stay in a cave abode on the island. The food was not bad. The people on the island had different opinions about his arrival as an outsider. Moreover, someone deliberately spread the news that Jiang Cheng addressed Yi Chun as senior. Jiang Cheng immediately became a laughingstock. However, even so, no one dared to attack Yi Chun. After all, Jiang Cheng was Old Man Golden Shark's disciple. Meanwhile, Yi Chun realized that there were people staring at him around the cave abode, as if they were monitoring a criminal. He did not care about that at all. Apart from meditating in closed-door cultivation, he would stroll around the island with his daughter. When Old Man Golden Shark and the other two heard his actions, they were confused by Yi Chen's actions. "Senior brother, did you hear that? Everyone outside thinks you're a fool." Wang Mei complained to Jiang Cheng under the rumors. "In my opinion, are you mistaken? Perhaps that brat isn't a grade 5 Mystic Master at all. He's at the Pseudo-Emperor stage at most. Junior sister, even if Senior Yi isn't a grade 5 Mystic Master and is only a Pseudo-Emperor, he's still a senior to us." Jiang Cheng comforted. "Anyway, be careful. It's best not to lose your prestige and master for an outsider. You might even be disliked by master." Wang Mei left after saying that angrily. That night, when most people were still asleep, Yi Chen lifted his head to look at the sky as if he had sensed something. There was a gleam in his eyes. "Is he here?" At the next moment, he picked up the snoring little girl and teleported out, landing in front of Jiang Cheng, who was on guard. "Senior, it's so late. Why aren't you resting?" Jiang Cheng was shocked at first before he said. Yi Chen squinted and said calmly, "If you don't want to die, it's best not to leave me." "What did you say?" Jiang Cheng could not react for a moment. "Fifth junior brother, did you hear that? This brat really thinks of himself as a senior and wants to protect you," a young man said sarcastically. The rest also laughed out loud. Just as Jiang Cheng was about to speak, a scream came from afar, breaking the dead silence of the night. "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" Everyone was shocked and rushed in the direction of the voice. When they stood on the northeast side of the island, their bodies froze and their pupils dilated. On the misty surface of the river, there were flames that covered the sky and covered the earth, rushing towards the island at high speed. If one took a closer look, they would realize that these were not flames. They were warships that looked like giant steel beasts. At a glance, there was no end in sight. Someone shuddered and shouted in fear. "It's the Navy. It's the Dali Dynasty's Navy." End of chapter. Chapter 1111. Someone shouted in fear. "It's the Navy. It's the Navy of the Great Li Dynasty." At the next moment, the entire Golden Shark Island instantly fell into an uproar. People kept waking up from their sleep and gathering over. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh as three figures with powerful auras rushed over. The faces of Old Man Golden Shark, Old Firesmith, and Old Man with Spirit were revealed. On the surface of the sea less than 3,000 meters away from Golden Shark Island, densely packed warships floated on the surface of the sea. The sea breeze whistled, and the flags fluttered. On these warships, there was an endless army. They held torches in their hands, and they were filled with an overwhelming, killing intent. At the front, there were countless ferocious beasts dragging the warships forward. These beasts were like mountains, covered in bone spikes, and had sharp fangs. As they moved forward, their bone armor collided with each other, causing the seawater to boil. When they saw the word Li on the warship's flag, the three of them gasped. "It's really the Great Li Dynasty's Navy. Moreover, it looks like it's the most elite navy of the Great Li Dynasty. It must be the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, Luo Kadi." Old Man Golden Shark's lips moved slightly, and the words he said made everyone's hearts sink. The Great Li Dynasty was the #1 overlord of the Tianfengxi area, surpassing all the sections. Even the 5 super sects of the Tianfengxi area, like the King Mu Fort, had to fear this colossus. The navy on the ship before them added up to no less than 100,000 people. Every single one of them was a martial artist who was familiar with water, and they were all experienced tigers and wolves. Facing such an army, even the millions of people on Golden Shark Island and the entire southern islands would probably be razed to the ground in an instant. Most importantly, the deputy commander-in-chief of the Great Li Dynasty's navy, Luo Kadi, had already shocked the world. With him personally leading the army, how could the southern islands resist? Yichen was also surprised. Judging from the appearance and equipment of the navy, this so-called Great Li Dynasty had already surpassed the great dynasties of the northern region. Old Man Firesmith said with a solemn expression, "The southern islands and the Great Li Dynasty don't border each other, and there's no conflict between us. Why would the Great Li Dynasty attack the southern islands in the middle of the night?" His words immediately reminded everyone of something. That was right. The Dali Dynasty was located in the northern part of the Tianfengxi area, no less than 100,000 nautical miles away from the southern islands. The two should not have interfered with each other. Old Man Mu Ling's expression changed slightly. He seemed to have thought of something and said in a low voice, "Fellow Taoists, could it be that the mysterious force from before was the Dali Dynasty?" Elder Golden Shark was alarmed when he heard that. A day ago, the entire southern islands had received a challenge from a mysterious force. They had thought that some force wanted to take over the southern islands, and they had even sent people to the mainland to ask for reinforcements. Who would have thought that the Dali Dynasty's navy would suddenly appear? If the mysterious enemy of the southern islands was really the Dali Dynasty, then they had no chance of winning this battle. "I'll go and ask." Elder Golden Shark took a deep breath before leaping up. He landed directly on the surface of the sea as his voice reverberated across the surface. "I am a lord of Golden Shark Island, Old Man Golden Shark. May I ask if you are the deputy commander of the Dali Dynasty Navy, Luo Kadi?" As his voice fell, the ferocious beasts that were advancing in the distance immediately stopped, causing the warships on the surface of the sea to stop as well. After a while, a huge dragon ship floated out from within. A man in black stood on the deck of the dragon ship. The man in black was around 40 years old. He was burly and majestic, and his eyes shone brightly. "I didn't expect you to know my name. It really is Luo Kadi." Old Man Hua and Old Man Mu Ling looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. "Lord Luo." Elder Golden Shark cupped his fists at Luo Kadi from afar and said, "The southern islands have never offended you. Why are you attacking the southern islands today?" Luo Kadi stood proudly on the deck and sneered in the wind. "The King Mu Fort disrespects the imperial power and ignores the Dali Dynasty's emperor. As a force under the King Mu Fort, you should be annihilated." Whoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, the entire Golden Shark Island fell into an uproar. Countless people were terrified. The expressions of Elder Golden Shark and the other two changed. What they did not notice was that a gleam flashed through Yi Chen's eyes. The southern islands are actually a subsidiary force of the King Mu Fort. Old Man Mu Ling smiled bitterly and looked at Luo Kadi from afar. "Luo Kadi, you've invaded the southern islands today. Aren't you afraid that the King Mu Fort will start a war with the Dali Dynasty after finding out about this?" There was a hint of threat in his tone. The King Mu Fort and the Dali Dynasty had fought a huge battle a year ago. Later on, the King Mu Fort barely won. Not only did the Dali Dynasty fear them, they even accepted more than 10 cities, including Tianfeng City. A mere King Mu Fort wants to start a war with the Dali Dynasty? Luo Kadi, who was on the dragon ship, seemed to be disdainful. "A year ago, the Dali Dynasty lost because we underestimated our enemy. Do you think the King Mu Fort still has a chance now?" At this point, his face was filled with cold, killing intent. To tell you the truth, the King Mu Fort is currently being targeted by everyone in the 5-set competition of the Tianfengxi area. Perhaps in a few days, you'll hear the news of the King Mu fort being destroyed. In that case, isn't the 5-sect competition a scam? A scam by the Dali dynasty against the Southern Islands High Sect? Old man Huagong's expression changed drastically. Ha ha ha. Luo Kadi suddenly laughed maniacally. I'll tell you one more thing. A day ago, the mysterious powerhouse who injured Old Man Golden Shark was arranged by me. My goal was to make you guys request help from the King Mu fort. The King Mu fort can't even take care of itself now. If its strength is dispersed because of you idiots, it'll be even easier for the Dali dynasty to get rid of it. What? Old Man Golden Shark and the other two trembled violently. They had never expected that the Dali dynasty would actually painstakingly set up such a trap in order to deal with the King Mu fort. First, they used the mysterious force to attack the southern islands to cause panic and make them send people to the King Mu fort to ask for help. Then, they dispersed the King Mu fort's strength. Shameless. Old Man Mu Ling was so angry that his face turned livid. Shameless? Luo Kadi sneered. There's nothing too deceitful in war. You pirates can only blame yourselves for not knowing what the art of war is, much less encircling and attacking reinforcements. All right, I've said enough to you guys. After I kill you guys, the entire southern islands will belong to the Dali dynasty. The smile on his face suddenly turned cold, and then he waved his hand. Advance, trample the southern islands. Leave no one alive. Roar. The ferocious beasts that were originally quiet and motionless on the surface of the sea moved together, roaring as they charged towards Golden Shark Island. In an instant, tens of thousands of sails fluttered, and killing intent surged through heaven and earth. The entire surface of the sea was on the verge of overturning. Seeing this, Old Man Golden Shark and the other two's faces turned grim. Clearly, they realized that there was no turning back. Everyone, since the Dali dynasty won't give us a way out, then we don't have to endure anymore. Old Man Golden Shark's aura erupted from his body and swept across the surface of the sea. His voice was extremely cold. If you don't want to die, then fight. At that moment, Jiang Chung, who was next to Yi Chun, pulled out his sword and roared, Everyone, there's no way out. Kill! Kill! Almost at that moment, the hundreds of thousands of people on Golden Shark Island roared in unison, their expressions incomparably furious. If the Greatly dynasty only wanted to conquer Golden Shark Island or capture them alive, they might not have been so eager to fight. However, Luo Kadi had made it clear that he wanted to flatten Golden Shark Island and kill them all. This was equivalent to not giving them a way out. This was equivalent to forcing everyone into a dead end. The only thing they could do now was to fight to the death. Old Man Mu Ling flicked his finger, and a green arrow of command landed in the hand of a young man. Phone, take my arrow of command and quickly head towards Spirit Island to gather everyone to reinforce Golden Shark Island. Yes, father. The young man took a deep breath in. Holding the arrow of command, he turned into a ray of light and flew towards Golden Shark Island. Yin Zhao, take my arrow of command and gather everyone at Firework Island to reinforce Golden Shark Island. Old Man Huagong did the same. At the same time, the warship that was 3,000 meters away was getting closer and closer to the island. The almost materialized, murderous aura almost suffocated many people. In the next moment, arrows that blotted out the sky and covered the earth shot over from the surface of the river, causing one scalp to go numb. End of this chapter. Chapter 11-12. Under such a dense barrage of arrows, many people screamed in pain as they were turned into porcupines. Whoosh! An arrow was pointed at Yi-chan. The little girl closed her eyes by instinct out of fear. Yi-chan squinted, and the arrow shattered on the spot. How dare you! Old Firesmith and Old Man with Spirit stepped out together and leaped to the surface of the sea, standing side by side with Old Man Golden Shark, intercepting many arrows for everyone. But Golden Shark Island still lost many people, and this was only the first wave of attack from the Dali Dynasty Navy. Jiang Cheng's eyes were bloodshot. He had an idea and shouted, Master, the enemy's momentum is overwhelming. Our Golden Shark Island can't defend against them. We can't fight them head-on. We can only retreat to the island and wait for reinforcements. Boom! Elder Golden Shark struck out with his palm and annihilated hundreds of arrows before roaring, "Fellow Taoists, quickly retreat to the island. Jiang Cheng, quickly activate the defensive array." Hearing this, Jiang Cheng immediately led many people to the core of the formation. However, at this moment, several figures directly charged out and killed many of Jiang Cheng's people in an instant. This sudden scene caught Jiang Cheng off guard. Second senior brother, third senior sister, what are you two doing? What for? The second senior brother he spoke of was a sinister-looking young man. He laughed coldly and said, "Junior brother, can't you see how ferocious the Imperial Court's army is? Golden Shark Island will only perish if we continue to stand our ground. It's better to give up and submit to the Imperial Court." Second senior brother is right. The third senior sister was a freckled woman. She said righteously, "Junior brother, as the saying goes, every man for himself. If you don't want to die, then scram to the side." Jiang Chen couldn't believe his ears. "Master has always treated you well, yet you dare to say such things? Master? What qualifications does he have to be our master?" The malicious-looking youth snorted coldly. "This old thing is extremely biased and has always favored you. Does he really think we don't know? Why are you wasting your breath on him?" The freckled woman urged, "Hurry up and destroy the core of the defensive formation. I'll hold him back." "How dare you?" Jiang Cheng couldn't restrain himself from slapping his palm towards the young man, and then profound energy erupted from his palm to form a golden mark. "Junior brother, I'm your opponent." The freckled woman's profound energy also burst forth, neutralizing the former's attack. The commotion caused by the two of them exchanging blows naturally attracted the attention of the others. Behind Jiang Cheng, Wang Mei was both shocked and angry. "Master, second senior brother, and third senior sister want to destroy the core of the formation and let the army of the Imperial Court in. Bastard." Old Man Golden Shark was immediately enraged when he heard that. He leaped into the air and sped towards the island. "Stop him! We must stop him!" Old Man with Spirit and Old Man Firesmith's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Once the protective array was destroyed, they would be completely finished. Yi Chun, who was in the crowd, frowned slightly. He glanced at the malicious young man who was less than 100 feet away from the core of the formation. Just as he was about to attack, an old man suddenly appeared beside him. It was Uncle Gong. The old man looked at him warily. "Little brother, I advise you not to act rashly. Otherwise, this old man will kill you on the spot." Old Man Golden Shark and the rest suspected Yi Chen's background, so they had instructed Uncle Gong to be wary of Yi Chun. Meanwhile, there were dozens of Golden Shark Island martial artists behind him. They were all looking at Yi Chun with hostility. Yi Chun could not help but shake his head. He secretly cursed Old Man Golden Shark and the rest for being so stupid. They could not even tell if he was a friend or a foe. Just as Old Man Golden Shark and the other two were speeding towards the island, a figure suddenly shot over from the warship in the distance. It was Luo Kadi who had attacked. "Old Geezer Golden Shark, I'm the opponent of you 3 pieces of trash." Luo Kadi's sleeves fluttered, and a terrifying true energy swept out like a storm with him as the center. Boom! Immediately after, terrifying energy erupted from his hand. Then, it condensed into a huge palm print that slapped at Old Man Golden Shark's head. "Luo Kadi, I'll kill you." Old Man Golden Shark's expression changed drastically. He could not care too much and immediately turned around. Mysterious energy erupted from his hand, and as runes surged, it condensed into a mysterious energy net to meet the attack. Rumble! As the two attacks collided, the sonic boom was like a deep muffled thunder that shook heaven and earth. Then, Old Man Golden Shark was sent flying on the spot. Many people were dumbfounded when they saw this. The number 1 person of Golden Shark Island was defeated. After Old Man Golden Shark stabilized his body with great difficulty, he spat a mouthful of blood and looked at Luo Kadi. why you were the mysterious person from that night? From the exchange earlier, he finally realized that the mysterious person who almost killed him that night was Luo Kadi. You're not stupid. Unfortunately, you found out too late. Luo Kadi smirked coldly. He stepped into the air and attacked Old Man Golden Shark again with terrifying energy on his back. Boom! At that moment, Old Man Wood Spirit and Old Firesmith attacked at the same time. Both of them attacked with all their might, as if they wanted to force Luo Kadi back. However, both of them were sent flying, and the mysterious energy in their bodies churned. In Martial Ancestor Realm, the three of them looked at Luo Kadi with incomparable shock. You actually broke through to Martial Ancestor Realm? The three of them were all level 5 Mystic Masters, which was equivalent to 3 Martial Emperor Realm Old Monsters. However, they were still no match for the other party. There was only one possibility. Luo Kadi had become a supreme Martial Ancestor. Otherwise, he would not be so terrifying. Very surprised, right? Luo Kadi stood with his hands behind his back. His face was full of mockery. I've been hiding for 20 years. Do you really think I'm just a Martial Emperor? Old Man Golden Shark and the other two immediately looked desperate. Not only did the Dali dynasty send 100,000 navy, they even sent a Martial Ancestor Realm. How could they resist? Boom! Suddenly, a series of deafening explosions came from Golden Shark Island. The entire island seemed to be shaking from the commotion. The core of the formation has been broken. The same thought appeared in everyone's mind. Then a sinister young man rushed over and knelt on one knee in front of Luo Kadi. He said respectfully, "Your subordinate greets the deputy commander." Seeing this, Old Man Golden Shark almost vomited blood. "Chio Xan, you bastard. How dare you betray me?" Countless people of Golden Shark Island glared at the sinister young man. Many of them even cursed him. "Betray you?" The sinister young man slowly raised his head and looked at Old Man Golden Shark. He grinned. "Old Man Golden Shark, do you really think I'm that useless disciple of yours, Chio Xan?" After saying that, he turned his head and lifted his hand to tear it apart. Then, he turned to look at Old Man Golden Shark and said, "Take a look at who I am." What greeted everyone's eyes was a very delicate face, just like a woman's face. Thousand illusion art. Old Man Golden Shark's expression changed. He then said in disbelief, "This is the long-lost Thousand Illusion Art. You have some eyes." Luo Kadi said coldly, "Tian Chun is my lieutenant. A month ago, I asked him to disguise himself and come to your side." "That's right." Tian Chun revealed a mocking expression. "Your second disciple, Chio Xan, was killed by me a month ago. You old thing, you still don't know about it." "Ha!" Elder Golden Shark's body shuddered violently, as if he had aged several decades in an instant. "So you've been planning for a month in order to destroy my Golden Shark Island? How can your Golden Shark Island be worthy of my meticulous planning? In the end, I only want to deal with the King Move Fort." Luo Kadi seemed to be disdainful. Then, his gaze turned cold as he said indifferently, "The three of you, go on your way. Soon, the King Move Fort will come to accompany you." His voice fell. He soared into the sky like a rock spreading its wings. Then, he descended from the sky and struck at Elder Golden Shark and the other two. "Ha ha!" Elder Golden Shark suddenly burst out laughing. "Luo Kadi, don't be arrogant. Even if the three of us die and the Southern Islands are destroyed, the Great Li Dynasty won't be able to destroy the High Sex King Move Fort." "Not bad." Old Man Wood Spirit and Old Firesmith also laughed sorrowfully, because there's a man behind the High Sex King Move Fort that your Great Li Dynasty can never afford to offend. If this person makes a move, killing you will be as easy as killing a chicken. "Kill me like killing a chicken?" Luo Kadi snorted coldly. "Who can kill me? Who dares to kill me? Go on your way, you three pieces of trash." Jiang Cheng's eyes were bloodshot. "Master, I'm a master." Everyone on the island was so furious that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Right at this moment, an indifferent voice sounded from a distant corner. "I can kill you, and I dare to kill you. P.S. I haven't been updating well recently, so I've been too embarrassed to say anything." Today, I'll say something. The new coronavirus is very serious, so everyone must be careful. Try to stay at home during the new year and don't go far. Try to wear a mask when visiting relatives. Also, don't participate in banquets and entertainment activities with many people, such as playing cards and mahjong. End of this chapter.